The Landmarks Commission meeting of July 9th, 2020. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. Good morning. Good morning.
Do you want to call a roll call? Are we okay with the quorum?
I'll start by reading the preamble, Mr. Chairman.
Okay.
And could everyone mute their microphones, please? Thank you. In compliance with notification requirements of Ohio's open meeting law under COVID-19 emergency declaration, notice of this meeting has been publicly posted. All boards and commissions under the purview of the City Planning Department conducts its meetings according to Robert's Rules of Order. Actions during the meeting will be taken by voice vote. Actions from any vote due to a conflict of interest record prior to the taking of any vote. In order to ensure that everyone participating in the meeting have the opportunity to be heard, we ask that you use the raise hand feature before asking a question or making comment. The raise hand feature can be found in the participants panel on the desktop and mobile version and activated by clicking the hand icon. Please wait for the chair or facilitator to recognize you and be sure to select unmute and announce yourself before you speak. When finished speaking, please lower your hand by clicking on the raise hand icon again and mute your microphone. We will also be utilizing the chat feature. There's a gray box. There you go. We will also be utilizing the chat feature to communicate with participants. The chat feature can be activated by clicking the chat button located on the bottom of the WebEx screen. All meeting activity is being recorded via the WebEx platform. These proceedings are also being live streamed via YouTube and TV20 for public view. We have provided a link to the meeting for those who wish to speak on a particular case via our website and email. We have also received emails from those who have provided written comment on a particular matter. Mr. Chairman, the meeting is yours.
Good morning. Thanks again. Mr. Secretary, do we have a report this morning from you?
No, we do not have a report. I will go ahead and call the roll.
Okay.
Ms. Anderson.
Here.
Ms. Bailey.
Here.
Mr. Kalikia.
Here.
Mr. Collier.
Here.
Mr. Dreyer.
Here.
Mr. Harrison.
Here.
Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones. Mr. Strickland.
Here.
Mr. Tarasic.
Here.
Ms. Trott. And for the record, Stuart Hastings is in attendance from the Law Department, as well as Julia LaPlaca and Carl Brunges from the Landmarks Commission staff. Mr. Chairman, we have a quorum.
Thank you very much. And we can begin with our first certificate of appropriateness, which is case number 20-027, the Clifton West Boulevard Historic District. Any comments from the secretary on this project?
Mr. Chairman, I don't have any at this time. I think Mr. Collier would like to introduce the project, and then we should get into the presentation.
Okay, Mr. Collier, please.
Yes, thank you. This project is one that obviously has some significance with respect to our local community, as well as nationally. This project is one that is a memorial project for Tamir Rice. We all know the circumstances surrounding Mr. Rice's death. And this is a very important project to the family and many of those who have helped to facilitate this effort. This project is also very important with respect to the city of Cleveland and the administration. And there's some requirements associated with this project, which you'll hear about as the presentation moves forward. So, Mr. Chairman, the administration had an opportunity to view this project and felt it was significant and very important and needed to be heard by the Landmarks Commission. And hopefully you will hear this project and deliberate on this matter. The administration actually supports the project, so we're looking forward to hearing what the board has to say about this particular matter. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Can we proceed with the presentation?
Yes, please have the participants introduce themselves and present the project.
And will you advance the slides as we're ready? Is that how this is working?
You're on mute, Maurice.
Yes, I'll be changing the slides. Just let me know when you need to change it.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jamie Schwartzberg. I'm a landscape architect with Daru Landscape Architecture. And we are here this morning with Diane Jones Allen with Diane Jones. Their offices are in Dallas and New Orleans, and she is a professor of landscape architecture at Diane, I can't remember, UT Austin.
University of Texas, Arlington.
Arlington.
Yes.
And I'll let Diane introduce herself.
Okay, hi, I'm Diane Jones Allen. I'm licensed and registered landscape architect. I've been honored to work with Jamie, Miss Rice, on this project, and I'll be presenting the design aspects of the project. So should we move forward or?
Yes, please.
Okay, so if we can go to the project. Okay, so this is the site, and actually you'll see this image again, but what you're just looking at is a perspective view of what it will look like when it sits within the landscape. And if we can go to the next, I'll go through this quickly. So this gives you, you know, a bird's eye view, aerial map of the location. You can see the location, and then you can see that it sits between the elementary school and then the recreation center. And it's exactly located in a triangle within that site. Go to the next. Okay, so the exact site is the site where the pavilion was, and there's an existing butterfly garden which sits on that site. That should give you a good idea of exactly where it is, adjacent to the parking lot. Next. Okay. This is existing conditions. So there is the existing butterfly garden there. You can see from the site, you can see the school, and then there are some existing bollards that were put there by the community. Next. Okay, so after visiting the site, luckily, Jamie, who's worked closely with me on this, is, you know, from Cleveland, works in Cleveland, knows the area well. So she was able to take me there. I was able to meet Miss Rice. And so the concept for this project is to basically memorialize this space, to celebrate and memorialize this space, and to use the existing butterfly garden, which is very appropriate. It signifies this young child who was 12 years old. And then also to connect that to a memorialization to make one piece that does both things. Next slide. Okay, so this is the overall design. So you can see the existing butterfly garden, which there will be a new path. So the butterfly garden will be restored. There'll be new stones to outline, so to shore up the shape of it. There'll be a new path that goes through the middle with a plaque. And then there will also, then that will lead a dedication plaque to Tamir's sister. And then that will lead through the site to the larger plaque, which is surrounded by River Stone, which runs into a dry creek. And so the dry creek does two things. It's part of the connection. It ties it to the earth and life, and then it also will collect stormwater, which can feed the memorial garden. And then the plaque itself is granite, a 4x4 granite that's etched with Tamir's face and has text on it, and the text basically is in the spirit of what I'm saying. Next slide. So this gives you a zoom in of that. So you can see the plaque. Everything's flush with the ground. Nothing stands up. When the site's graded a bit, it'll be graded so that when it does rain, the water will run down into the butterfly garden. But everything's flush in the site. And it also includes some stone benches. And there will be 2 new trees placed on either side to actually help provide shade and kind of give a little enclosure without making it unsafe. So that's why we're using just 2 trees in terms of new planting. Next. This again kind of zooms in more so that you can see the paving, and then in the paving, there will be some butterflies, which we're hoping to do a project where we work with the community to have kids actually paint those small butterflies that you see. And those are also paving, they're also stone, and they fit flush within the paving, but they'll be precast and painted by kids in the neighborhood, hopefully. And then we can go to the next slide. And you can also see on that one the existing bollard. So this is a section which lets you know that it's completely flush with the ground. Nothing's standing up, except the trees, the planting. The dry creek is flush in the ground, and the granite engraved stone is flush to the ground. So in essence, it's basically putting a new plaque and refreshing the butterfly garden, but making this connection, which kind of symbolizes, life, and then what happened, in the memorial. Next. Okay, so this gives you some ideas of the paved materials, and it was really important to have materials that were durable, easy to replace, but the reason why we're using permeable pavers, which are really, we're trying to be environmentally friendly. That was really important. So water seeps through. Those pavers are set on a gravel bed, and so water seeps through, not to increase runoff. And also they're very soft and they can sit evenly. Clean, a very clean design, and that's why we wanted the benches that you see, but very durable. That's why the stone and the pavers. And then the dry creek, that's an example of a dry creek. So you can see that it's flush. And one thing that we're going to do there, and I've done in many other projects, is put prairie film. So basically what that'll do, that'll hold those stones in place so that kids and people can't pick them up and throw them around. So there's a film that's poured on top of that, but it causes the stones just to stick together, but they're pockets, so the water still flows down and just rainwater just will seep through, so there won't be any flooding. And then that dry creek is tied to the butterfly garden. And then this is the tree. We wanted a medium-sized tree, one that, you know, had a nice trunk. Oh, you want to talk about the tree, Jamie? No?
We just worked with Ms. Rice to select a tree that she felt was appropriate. This is a white flowering red bud. It's a native tree. And it will kind of have a lovely soft presence. I think we're under a very large oak there that we don't want to compete with. We want to protect that as much as possible. So this is a tree that will be happy in that condition.
Yeah, and that was really important that to have native plants, and that's why working with Jamie was important, because this is her landscape, and so she could able to give something that was native. And I'm glad that she mentioned Miss Rice, because in terms of how we design is basically listening. Our expertise is in form making and listening to Miss Rice, who really was important into, you know, how we shaped this and came up with a form that we did. I think there's one more slide, maybe. Yeah, and so that's just a rendering of what it would look like. As you could see, it sits low in the ground. It doesn't obstruct any views. You can see in and see out. We're keeping those bollards. There's the butterfly garden, probably is the thing that stands up the most, and that's planting. Everything's very clean, and you can see the walking path with the butterflies in it, and the benches. Ms. Rice wanted a place that people could come and do both things, celebrate and memorialize at the same time, and a place that, you know, would be wonderful if there was 1 people or 20 people, and fit within the landscape. And that was a place of peace, like I said, celebration and memorialization. And I think that's the last slide. Yes.
Yes.
Thank you.
So the only thing I would add to what Diane said, this is Jamie again, is that I think throughout the whole process, we all really thought about the context of the site and the neighborhood and the playground adjacency. And, you know, we've talked to the school. They're not sure if the school is going to get rebuilt on the site or if it's going to move to a different location, but we assume the playground is always going to stay. We've been there on multiple occasions. The park is very heavily used, and we really thought about how we can create a sacred space and a moment of sanctity in a very busy public landscape, but also in something that's very much a part of people's everyday lives, something that's going to sort of go with the community and with the park and kind of enhance the green space that's there. And I think that's why we moved towards a design that was, we felt like it was appropriate and symbolic, but also lets you discover it. And I think if the committee has questions at this point, we would be happy to answer them.
Well, I'd like to commend you on this really delicate beauty of this design. The space is actually very beautiful already, and you've actually enhanced it. With the use of these durable materials, I think the whole space will continue to grow and remain so friendly to the neighbors and its activities. So thank you for that. Are there any comments from the commission?
Mr. Chairman, we have Director Collier and Mr. Pettit with their hands raised.
Director Collier, please.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, just a couple of comments. the way in which this project was done, obviously being flush with the ground plane, it does not constitute an outdoor work of art, which would have taken it through a different process. It's more of a public improvement in this scenario. It also respectfully honors Mr. Rice and does it in a way that integrates the desires, it seems, of Mrs. Rice and the sister of Tamir Rice with the butterfly imagery embedded in the ground plane also. So I agree that it's obviously tastefully done. The other comment I do want to make after speaking with Jamie, the content, which is still not yet fully baked, that's going to be drafted, by Ms. Rice, and obviously the city would need to engage in that dialogue with respect to that content due to the sensitivity of the incident that occurred here. That's the only sort of open element of this. But from our perspective, the design is tasteful and appropriate in this context. Thank you.
I totally agree. Thank you for your comments. Mr. Secretary?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to point out that there's no design review report today. It was determined that this project should go directly to the commission for review. I would also like to point out that this is the time for anyone else who would like to speak to the project before the commission deliberates. I do want to recognize that Councilman Zone is in attendance, as well as Samaria Rice herself.
Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. Harrison, Ms. Anderson, Mr. Strickland, and Ms. Bailey, all with their hands raised. So it looks like all of the commission just about has a comment.
Who was the first to raise the hand?
Mr. Harrison.
Mr. Harrison, please.
And we also have Ray with his hand raised. So everybody.
Okay. Mr. Harrison, your comments, please.
Well, just briefly, I think this is an absolutely terrific design. I want to congratulate all of the designers who've worked on it. It is sensitive and retains its poignancy. And as you said, Mr. Vice Chair, it actually, in fact, enhances the natural landscape that we see. I did want to ask one question of the architect. Have you alluded to this was a horrific event that really scarred the entire community here? Have you alluded in design to that event? I mean, this wasn't just a young man who fell down and scraped his head. This was a terrible event that occurred, and I know that in words you will be addressing that in the content or not addressing it. I'm not sure what the decision will be made. That's not really for our purview. But I just did wonder, because one element is a sort of biomorphic a butterfly, and then another element is a very formal, very hard-edged element. Is that your way of alluding to a difficult, really hurtful, horrible event that occurred here?
I want to thank you for your perception. Exactly. If you would go back one to the plan, if we could step back to the plan view, one more, the larger plan, one more.
I should say, if that is what you did, I applaud it. I applaud it strenuously, because I think that needs to be included in the design aspects.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that. So where the two paths cross, so where you have that cross, where the butterflies end and the two paths cross, that's like the event. And then you have the box, which he was put in, and some could say, the society put him there, or it could have if he was in a box and went to being a butterfly, or he was a butterfly and this event happened and put him in a box. So we do allude to it strongly, but the design is subtle. So you would have to kind of look at it long and perceive that. And that's the idea where Jimmy was talking about discovery. So it's a place you can come back and look at it and get that meaning. So yes, exactly what you said.
Oh, congratulations. I think that is absolutely the way this should have been handled. So I'm very pleased and very supportive. Thank you.
We had Michelle Anderson next.
The chair recognizes Michelle Anderson. Michelle?
Thank you. Director Collier answered my question. I was going to ask about the text on the plaque. This is a wonderful project. It's so sensitive to the tragedy that occurred there. And I'm really happy to see that everybody's been involved creating this space. Thank you.
Thank you.
We had Mr. Strickland.
Mr. Strickland, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to echo the comments of my fellow commission members and commend the entire design team and Ms. Rice on this wonderful design for this memorial garden. I have a question about the border for the butterfly garden. Did you say that those white stones are resetting existing stones, or are they new? And is it a natural material or a precast material for that border?
So those are existing stones. There are stones there, and we might have to replace some. And they're all going to be painted white. But it's stones that are there, and they'll be painted white. And if there's some missing, then we'll replace those to make sure it completely outlines it. Yeah. So we want to go with the stones that they have going around, but we want to paint them and replace any gaps.
All right, thank you very much.
We had Councilman Zone.
Councilman Zone, please.
Good morning, commission members. I want to first open up my comments by recognizing the persistence and advocacy of Mrs. Rice. Samara Rice has been dreaming about this since November 22nd, 2014, when her son was tragically taken from him by a Cleveland police officer. I've had the opportunity to have many, many meetings over the years with Mrs. Rice and other advocates about working to build a community space that respected her son, that respected the tragedy that occurred, but really memorialized and celebrated that young man. It was a hard way to get here, and I hope Mrs. Rice might want to make a comment when I'm done. We've had many meetings at City Hall. We had multiple meetings with the Division of Recreation. We've had many meetings with Director Cox and Assistant Director Kim Johnson, and I'm glad that she was able to finally meet with the city administration collectively and advance this project. I've always been supportive of her putting a memorial at this location. A question came up, or a comment about the uncertainty of the school that Jamie mentioned. I want to speak with great certainty because I had a conversation yesterday with Eric Gordon, the CEO of the municipal school district. Marion Seltzer is getting rebuilt on that site, and the city is working to make sure that we can help them with some parcels that they need of city space. This site does not disrupt the construction of the new school. That was always a concern that I had and I have always shared with Mrs. Rice. We've confirmed that this particular footprint would not be impacted. Marion Seltzer is a wonderful school and wonderful children there. And I would hope, Jamie, when you want to work with, or Miss Allen said, children in the neighborhood to help paint those little butterflies, that I could even help you engage the greater community and also those kids who go to that school to really make that a special space. So I'm here just to lend my support to the project. You might have noticed that it has 2 council members' names affixed to it. This location is in my ward. The building, the Fine Arts Center, is in Councilman Mooney's ward. But I've been working again with Mrs. Rice for about 6 years now, and I fully support the project.
Thank you, Councilman. It's sad, very sad that we have to have this horrible tragedy to inspire us to create something so touching. You know, the butterfly obviously has been the symbol of perpetual life forever in human history. This is now the season of the monarchs, and I was wondering maybe in the garden if there's some milkweed plants.
Yes, actually, there will be. There's the butterfly garden right now is designed specifically to attract butterflies, and our intent when we kind of enhance the planting is to include some of the native milkweeds as well. So yes.
So it's very clear that this is really a project, and it's a wonderful addition to the city of Cleveland and the community. And I personally support it fully. And if we are ready to make a motion, would someone do that, please?
Mr. Chairman, we still have Adrian Bailey and Mr. that also wanted to comment.
Okay, Adrian, please.
Maurice, can you go to the perspective drawing? Keep going.
Forward or back?
Forward.
At the very end.
The last one, I believe. That one, yes. First of all, I would like to commend the design team for doing this beautiful design in honor of Tamir Rice, as well as other parties involved in making this happen. This is really a beautiful project. This is a question to the architect and everyone else on the team as well that was involved in this. I like the design, and because everything is on the ground, and your eye will lead you, and understand the memorial, which is the darker color, will lead the individual directly to that design. I'm just wondering, just to add an accent color, because the polos already have colors in there that separate or blend in. Just wondering, have you thought about the benches being maybe not closer, but a little slight darker color, just to lead the eye to the benches, but not the same color as the important item, which is leading the person to the plaque? That's just one question. The second one is, understand this is a recreation center, and I'm not sure how the city of Cleveland will look at the park as far as nighttime. Could you answer how at night, like if anyone want to gather, if there's any lighting, or is that possible?
So, this is Diane again. So the benches, and I guess the benches, good comment, because the benches we're trying to get that, we want that stone to be very close to the color of the paving.
Okay.
The squares, yes. So it really ties in that soft, gray. So we'll work with the bench manufacturer, and get samples to make sure that it really matches. It's pretty close. And then the lighting, there could be in-ground lights. We haven't really discussed that yet, but there's a possibility to put lighting at each of those bollards. Mm-hmm. And actually, now we can use solar lighting, that we wouldn't have to have electrical. We could actually put solar, disc at each one of those bollards if Ms. Rice desired, and the city, Ms. Rice and the city desired to have some night lights. So it would be simple to do that, and it wouldn't disrupt the design. Just put them, and then they'd collect solar energy and keep with the idea of something that's sustainable, because that was really important and really friendly.
And I also think because the site is right adjacent to the existing parking lot, the parking lot is well lit at night. So we will be, from that standpoint, there will be it won't be dark at night.
Okay. And then I have one more question. This just came to my mind. I forgot to mention it. The benches, I understand the concept of the flower where the two pathway intersect. Have you looked at maybe putting a few butterflies on the side of the benches?
That's something we thought of. We thought of keeping them on the path because they kind of lead from that butterfly and kind of take you to the event. So we didn't want to kind of get them scattered around because the idea was to keep the design, very clean and elegant, nice, and having the butterflies on them. But yeah, that's not something we thought about.
One more thing, is there street lighting around in that area that can help at nighttime, help illuminate that area?
Isn't it like?
So this is Councilman Zone. I could speak to that question. So Ms. Commissioner Bailey, there is actually pretty good lighting in that area. There is lighting that comes off the building. There's a utility pole that's close by. What I could do is work with the architects and ensure that if we need additional lighting, maybe even Cleveland Public Power could put on some type of beam that could shoot down on that space to illuminate it.
Yeah, that way you don't have to spend a lot of money if it's not necessary. Yeah. All right, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we still have Mr. Tarasik.
Mr. Tarasik, please.
And first of all, to our host, am I the final comment from the board here?
Yes, I don't see anybody else with their hand raised at this point.
Okay, thank you. First of all, I'd like to echo the comments of my fellow commission members. This is a beautiful project, a wonderful project, and commend all of those who are involved for both its sensitivity and its creativity. And it has my full support. And being that I am indeed the last member of the commission to make a comment, I would be honored to put forth the motion then to accept this project and approve this project as presented.
Thank you, Mr. Tarasik. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Bob Strickland, I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Mr. Strickland. I would like to add couple more comments. We were talking about color. You have this already amazing composition of these trees that have been there for years. But I'm really intrigued by this invitation to look down, especially the different colored stones in the dry creek. Dry creeks are usually a symbol of hope and change as they change colors over the course of the seasons through introduction of water and leaves and things like that. So I am really very impressed with this. And obviously, there's a lot of thought that went into it, and I congratulate everybody involved. We have a motion and a second. Do we have a vote, please? Were all the ayes raise their hands? Approvals?
Mr. Chairman, I will have to call the roll.
Call the roll. Thank you. Sorry.
Thank you.
Yeah, I forgot.
And Ms. Anderson. Ms. Bailey.
Yes.
Mr. Colicchio.
Yes.
Mr. Collier.
Absolutely.
Mr. Dreyer.
Yes.
Mr. Harrison.
I believe Ms. Anderson, you over her too quickly, Don.
Oh, I'm sorry. Ms. Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you.
Now I'm ready for me.
Mr. Harrison again.
Yes.
Mr. Strickland.
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Thank you to the committee. We appreciate your comments.
Our next case is 028, the Franklin West Clinton Historic District. Any comments from the secretary?
Mr. Chairman, I'll leave my comments until we get to the Design Review Committee report and just update the commission on another issue, but I'll let the applicants present first.
Very good, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, it looks like we have, is it Hans Kicken?
That's right. I'm Hans Kicken, and this is Laura Klingler. And
Hello.
we live at 7708 Franklin Boulevard. We had sent a presentation ahead. Do you guys have that, or?
We sure do. Just tell me when to change the slides.
Okay, great. Yeah, we can go ahead to the first slide. So we have a project of much less social significance, but we are looking to change the roof on our house and update it. And so we need your approval to do that. So some of you may be familiar with this house. It was Oliver Alger's house that was previously on Detroit, and it was moved in 1998 by the Detroit Shoreway CDO in place of its current location. We purchased the house in 2018, about a year and a half ago. And since then, we've been obviously looking to take care of it and make some improvements. You can see in the picture, we put a fence in last year. This year, we wanted to do something that helped the environment. Also, our roof had some issues, and so we thought this would be a great time to do solar panels with a new roof this year. So we've already reached an arrangement to put solar panels on it. And then we had the decision of what to do with the roof as well. So if you go to the next slide. I'll try to kind of move quickly through this, but please welcome any questions as we go. We may also have a representative from First Choice Roofing who we're working with. Charles Adams was going to try to call in. I know he was running between some meetings. Hopefully, if we get some any technical questions about the roofing, hopefully he'll be available to chime in. But so the current roof is asphalt shingles. It was installed at the time the home was moved in around 97. When we purchased the house, there were some shingles coming off of the roof. We've had them repaired. We've since had some additional shingles come off. The prior owners experienced some ice damming. So we think it's basically reached the end of its life, and it's time for a replacement. And if we move to the next slide. I mentioned that we're putting solar panels on. So as we kind of investigated, we made the decision on solar first, and then started investigating options for the roof. And it really, obviously our default was an asphalt shingle roof. That's pretty common, and it's the cheapest. But when we looked at the options, we felt that the standing seam metal roof made a lot of sense. It pairs well with the solar choice for a couple of reasons. Yeah. But so I'll go into that in the next slide. But here's the details of the product we've chosen. So it's as I mentioned, standing seam metal roof. Manufactured locally here by Classic Metals, who works with First Choice Roofing. There's a link to their website if there's any questions about specifications as well. So we can go to the next slide. So we considered a variety of options. This first one is the color we initially chose, which was a colonial red. You'll notice that our house has red trim on it. And we thought it matched perfectly, made a nice visual appeal. We did meet with the Franklin West Clinton Design Review Committee a few weeks ago with Don. One of the suggestions was, as we thought about the historical accuracy of the roof, one of the suggestions was that, a slate roof was probably more common when the house was built, certainly more so than the current shingles. And so they suggested maybe a slate color would allude to kind of the historical color that may have been there. And so on the next slide, we just offer that there are some slate colors available, and if that is more preferable, we're certainly willing to consider or happy to adjust to a slate color that would maybe match a slate roof. So I think we just have a couple more slides, maybe two more. I wanted to just touch on the benefits of pairing the metal roof with the solar. So as I mentioned, we're putting solar on. We're certainly very focused on what we can do to reduce our environmental footprint. The metal roof had what ultimately swayed us to go to the standing seam was a lot of the benefits it had with that and the environmental benefits itself of the metal roof. The metal roof is mostly recyclable, right? So asphalt shingles, we throw away 11 million tons of asphalt shingles every year in the United States. Most of them go into landfills and stay there for over 300 years, whereas the metal roof can be taken off and immediately recycled. And so that's appealing. There's also some energy efficiency benefits of the metal roof from reflecting the sun and keeping cooling costs down in the summer. And then also it pairs nicely with the solar panels in that the standing seam roof that we chose has nothing is exposed, so all of the attachments are underneath the roof, so there's no exposure to the elements. The solar panels can be attached to the seams through some brackets, so you don't have to perforate the roof. So if we went with an asphalt shingle roof, obviously we'd have to punch a hole in the roof or in some way. Obviously it can be done, to try to mitigate water intrusion. I think it creates a weakness over time. And finally, our current roof lasted, as I said, about 23 years. We hope that the solar panels, they're expected to last up to 30 years or more. So thinking ahead, we didn't want to be in a situation where we would have to replace the roof, take the solar panels off, and then have them reinstalled. And so that's another benefit with the metal roof. We get a much longer life, and so it should well outlast the solar panels and eliminate that additional work. If we go to the last slide. We certainly thought about the historical accuracy and obviously the aesthetics of the roof. Our house, as I mentioned, was built, we understand to be around 1850, 1860. It probably had slate or wood shingles on it. For practical as well as cost reasons, those are not an option for us right now. And so we looked at the other options. We considered obviously asphalt shingle, which was quoted to us at about $18,000. The standing seam metal roof is about $30,000, and we think for the significantly longer life that we get out of it and some of the other benefits, that is actually more economical and kind of pays off. We did look at a metal shingle roof as an option. We were quoted about $45,000 for that, and we just felt that was out of our price range. So we thought that the standing seam metal roof kind of provided the most value and hit a lot of the other elements. Asphalt shingle, obviously the house has had a number of roofs, right? It's been replaced many times. It's certainly not original to the house. Asphalt shingles, it's my understanding they were invented in the 1900s, so certainly wouldn't have been around, for at least the first 40 years of the life of the home. Standing seam metal roofs were available at the time the house was built, and were used, that we understand that they weren't common in this area in Northeast Ohio. Yeah, of the available materials, we just thought it made the most sense for the environment, the appearance, the historical accuracy, and cost effectiveness, and for the long-term value of our home, right? So that's the end of our presentation. We are happy to take any questions or discuss anything further. We welcome your input.
Thank you very much. Do we have a report from the local neighborhood committee?
Mr. Chairman, I invited the chair of the Franklin West Clinton Design Review Committee, but I'm not sure if he's in attendance.
Okay.
If you go to the next slide, we have the committee's report, or the next one. Yeah, thank you. This was reviewed last month by the committee. The discussion, we had a long discussion with the applicants, and the arguments basically revolved around
We lost you, Mr. Pettit.
We lost Don.
It wasn't us.
historical appropriate. I'm sorry.
We lost you there for a minute.
Oh, sorry.
So the comments revolved about a certain issue?
Well, the historical accuracy of a metal roof on this house, as well as the aesthetics of the metal roof. The vote was 5-3 in favor. I'd like to also point out that the solar panels were reviewed and approved earlier this year. It also went to the committee. They were approved by another split vote. Staff decided that it could be, the panels could be approved administratively because I felt that they basically met our primary criteria based on location. It was also based on the fact that COVID-19 hit in the middle of March, and I didn't feel that this could be taken to the commission in a timely manner. So those are the issues we talked about. The commission in the past that I'm aware of has only approved one metal roof on a historic building, a historic house. We do approve them on additions and new construction, and sometimes on outbuildings, but it's something we generally discouraged. But that's why we're here today, to get your opinion of the proposal.
Which project has a metal roof? Which house, historical house?
There's a house on West 31st Place, just south of Franklin. That's the only one that I can remember.
West 33rd?
West 31st.
Oh, 31st, okay.
Yeah.
It's a one-way street off of Franklin going south.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, we have Ms. Bailey, we have Mr. Tarasic, and we have Mr. Harrison.
Ms. Bailey, please.
Secretary Patrick, I have a comment. I needed to understand your comment in regards to the weapon. Did you say what was approved in the past? My question is, was it the solar panel with the asphalt roof? The solar panel, was that approved on this project in the past? I'm trying to understand your comment.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Bailey. I did leave out that part. When we approved the solar panels, I was unaware that there was a proposal to put a metal roof on the house. So it was based on putting the panels on an existing asphalt shingle roof.
Okay. All right. I have some comments, especially the presentation. I understand that the solar panel was approved with asphalt in the past. I think we should, because this is a different type of material, I think the solar should be shown with the metal, so we can have an idea what we're looking at. Also, the drawing's not telling me, other than the color, which direction the seams are going and how is the metal roof seams are placed on the roof. It's not shown me in the presentation. And also, because there's so many pitch on the house, which normally comes in the home, my concern with a metal roof involving pitching in the winter months, when icicles start building up on metal roof, it starts sliding down past the eaves. So I'm looking at it as a hazard, just to let you know. So those are my concerns. I don't have enough information to see with the solar panel how the relationship with that, with the metal roof, and the metal roof itself is not showing me detail how it's looking in the final design. Those are my concerns.
Yeah, thank you. I think I can provide a little bit of a response there. So just in regards to the timing, we knew we needed to replace the roof. We made the solar decision first through the Yellow Light company that we were working with. And then we made the roofing decision after. And as I mentioned, in part, the roofing decision was somewhat guided by our decision that we knew we were going to put solar on. So I wasn't aware of the need to submit the two projects together. Obviously, this is a new process for me. But the solar panels will be on the peak of the roof, the top part. So in the picture that you can see, they're in the back section of the peak of the roof. They'll basically be behind that front eave there in 2 rows on the top facing east and 2 rows facing west, kind of near the back.
Can we see the picture again with the solar panels, please?
I don't think there is a picture with the solar panels.
Okay.
The panels won't be visible from Franklin Boulevard because they'll
Right.
be in the back section of the home.
Sure.
So they'll really only be visible if you're traveling southbound on West 77th.
Okay.
So they're not really going to affect the visual from Franklin.
Okay.
Looks like Mr. Pettit is holding up an image of the roof and the location of the, oh, no, we just lost him, and of the solar panels, if you can see his video feed.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Can you speak? Oh, yeah, if you could speak maybe.
Yeah.
I'm sorry I don't have this electronically, but this shows the panels on the east roof
Right.
with Franklin at the bottom of the picture. I'm sorry, that must be the west roof. I don't have the other one, but you can see that it's near the peak and above the cross gable.
Okay. Who was next?
We had Mr. Harrison, and
I'm
Mr.
sorry.
Harrison, did you have your hand raised?
There was I apologize. There was another question in there from Ms. Bailey that I didn't respond to, which was the seams. So the seams. I think there's a description of the product a few slides back, which indicates that they are 18 inches apart. 14 inches is an option as well. And so it would be vertical seams, 18 inches apart, and they're 1 3/4 tall. Yes, and there's a question about ice.
And we do plan to install the ice dam prevention so the ice will not be sliding off the metal.
Good point.
Right, near all of the walkways to prevent it from sliding to endanger anyone. So that was it. Sorry, and we can move on to the next question.
Sure.
Want to make sure I responded.
Mr. Harrison, please.
You're muted, sir.
All right, Maurice, could you go to the slide with the red roof?
Sure.
I believe it's one before. There you go. to the owners, how, I'm just curious, how do you know that it was, dates back to 1850 to 60? Do you have documentation to that decade?
Well, the Cleveland Historical Society has documentation, and there are many newspaper articles about our home. And so the write-up about our home that is on the Cleveland Historical Society's website includes that time frame.
Okay, well, full disclosure, I live in a house that's very similar to your house, a different footprint, but certainly the same pitches of gable, et cetera. And that my house was built in between 1869 and 1870. So I wondered if it might be perhaps a decade later. But this kind of vernacular Italianate style was certainly begun in the 50s. So if your house does date to that decade, that's marvelous. I will say that throughout America, standing seam roofs, you are just as likely to find an Italianate house like this one with a standing seam roof beginning in the 1850s, certainly through the 1870s. In the 1880s, they went back to shingles. They just loved them. But, and prior to that, they didn't have really metal standing seams. So they did use slate and wooden shingles. But because of the fact that in this region, we don't see a whole lot of them, doesn't really bother me because we don't see a whole lot of houses of this period in Northeast Ohio. They just don't still exist. So I did quite a lot of research on houses of this type and this style. And in fact, your red roof is much more, if it was going to have been a standing seam roof, the whole benefit of these roofs is that you could have painted them. And so the fact that, you want this dark red is actually quite historically accurate if the house had a standing seam roof, much more so than just a dull gray slate color. So I think because the house has been moved out of its original context, because the standing seam roof, we don't know exactly what kind of roof this house had. Therefore, historically accurate roofs are, in my view, perfectly appropriate to apply to this situation. I think that these homeowners should be allowed to put the roof on and put this darker red color on if that's what they want. They could certainly paint it those slate colors as well. You do see examples of that, but I think this is far more attractive and actually far more historically accurate to a standing seam roof. Now, in the picture that Mr. Pettit put up of the solar panels seem to come all the way to the front of that large gable on the facade. And is that the case?
Yeah, that was our original design, and I'm not sure if there was a mix-up in that. We actually made an adjustment to, from the picture that Mr. Pettit showed, the front half of those panels would be moved to the west side and aligned next to the ones in the back.
Okay, well, I would support that. I would not support bringing those solar panels all the way forward to the edge of the front facade. That would be really jarring aesthetically. So just to sum up my comments, our esteemed colleagues on the Design Review Committee were very well-meaning in trying to get you to go to slate, but I actually think that in fact what you've done is just as historically accurate as putting an asphalt shingle roof on it right now. So I have absolutely no problem with the standing seam, nor do I have a problem with this dark red color. Now, if you go more cherry red or fire red or pink or purple, I would have a problem with that. But this late 19th century dark tone with a lot of brown in it is absolutely perfectly appropriate for a standing seam roof.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we had Ms. Anderson next.
Ms. Anderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I can appreciate that the owners of this house would like to put on a durable roof that's going to last a lifetime. These roofs are expensive, and I think they're frankly dangerous to put on given the steep pitches of these large houses. A few years back, the Restoration Society was involved with the re-roofing of the Holy Ghost Church and the home at 2420 West 14th. It's, I don't know what the material is. It looks very, very substantial and permanent. It might be the metal shingles that you referenced in your presentation that I understand you don't want to spend $45,000 to install those. But I was just wondering if you had explored that. You mentioned you were working with the Restoration Society, and I was wondering if that was one of your considerations, that type of roof, if you had a chance to check that out.
Thank you. Yeah, no, I don't know if we misheard something. We haven't been working with the Restoration Society, but not familiar with the project you referred to. So the only comment I can make is as you mentioned, we looked into metal shingles and found that to be, as you said, pretty expensive.
Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. Pettit and Mr. Strickland with their hands raised.
Mr. Pettit, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to point out that the material on Holy Ghost Church is not metal. It's a synthetic material. I guess it's closer to a rubber-like appearance. It's intended to replicate a slate roof. So it's definitely not a metal product.
Okay.
And we had Mr. Strickland.
Mr. Strickland, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thought I would just weigh in and reinforce that I'm in favor of the metal roof and the red color. It kind of reminds me of Garfield's home in Mentor. Mm-hmm. The body color for the house is a dark gray tone, but it's got a red roof on it. It's not a metal roof, but I think it's the appropriate historical context. And it sounds like the owner has done a lot of research. I think that you're working with the Western Reserve Historical Society as opposed to the Restoration Society. Is that correct?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
We have information from the historical societies about the history of our home, but we have not specifically consulted them about our roof proposal.
I understand. Okay, well, so those are my comments. I agree. The red tone is more appropriate than the gray tone, and how it would provide an accent to this house would be historically appropriate. So I'd be in favor of these.
Mr. Chairman, we have Councilman Zone.
Councilman Zone, please.
You're muted, sir.
Thank you. Technology, right? Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We are talking about arguably the most significant home in Ward 15. And I remember the day that it was being moved, and I walked along the route from West 67th in Detroit to this location, and several schools had the school children lined up. It was quite an event in our community. The applicants have been wonderful caretakers of this home. They have significantly made improvements since they moved. I don't have a vote in the say, but I do prefer the red roof over the slate. And I think that if they could mitigate the visual appearance of the solar panels along the front facade of the Franklin Boulevard, jetting out there, I think it could be tastefully done. I would encourage the applicants to see if, I don't know if the solar panels come in various tones or shade, if they could get a type of solar panel that doesn't appear so prominent along that dark red backdrop of that roof, I think would be tastefully done. And I have no reservation about the commission moving forward approving this request.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure if Ms. Anderson had her hand raised again.
I did, yes.
Okay.
Thank you. Personally, aesthetically, I prefer the red roof. I'm going to defer to Commissioner Harrison regarding the historical accuracy of that, but personally, I just like the look. I'm concerned that once you place the solar panels on the red roof, they're going to be more prominent than if you were to place them on a roof which more mimics the slate color. I still am a little bit uncomfortable because I would still like to see you explore using the material that was used on the West 14th house. And again, you can find out more about that material from the Restoration Society. But I do like the red roof.
Thank you. I also like the red roof. I think it's, the house is stunningly beautiful, very classical Italian. And the red roof, I think, seems to add a certain elegance to it. As far as the solar panels are concerned, that's an interesting issue because it's obviously not historical. But on the other hand, I think we have to make some adjustments to contemporary architectural features and technology. So I don't really have an issue with the solar panels. I think they should be discreetly installed as suggested by the owners. Otherwise, I have no further comments.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Zone, Councilman Zone, did you still have your hand raised?
No, technology, okay. I forgot to lower it. My bad.
No problem. Mr. Harrison, you do have your hand raised.
Yes, I can't help myself being an historian. So I offer you 2 footnotes for a standing seam roof on this type of Italianate villa. Samuel A.J. Downing first indicated them as appropriate in 1850. That's when this craze for these vernacular Italianate villas within cities began. And more importantly, Samuel Sloan's cottage houses in 1867 also notes that they are the most prevalent house form in that period. So those are 2 bookends for the appropriateness of a standing seam roof on an Italianate house of this type. And in all cases, the roofs were depicted as red or painted with stripes. So while I don't know of any indication that any were painted with stripes in this neighborhood or this area, I think, again, this red roof, the owner should be allowed to put this red standing seam roof on this Italianate style house. Thank you very much.
Any other comments?
We have no other hands raised, Mr. Chairman.
Very good. Will someone entertain a motion?
Looks like Mr. Harrison again.
Mr. Harrison.
I move we approve this proposal as presented.
Very good. Is there a second?
Ms. Bailey has her hand raised.
Second.
Very good. We have a first and a second. Can we call for a roll, please?
Ms. Anderson?
Thanks to Commissioner Harrison's convincing arguments, I will vote yes.
Ms. Bailey?
Yes.
Mr. Colicchia?
Yes.
Mr. Collier?
Yes.
Mr. Dreyer?
Yes.
Mr. Harrison?
Yes.
Mr. Strickland?
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Excellent, very good, and good luck.
Well,
Looking forward
thank
to
you
seeing
all
it.
for your time and for your historical attention to detail. And we really appreciate you reviewing our project, and we hope to take great this beautiful home for many years to come.
Yeah, and thank you, Mr. Harrison, for the additional background. That's great information. We're excited.
Yes, very good, excellent.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So our third project in the agenda is case number 20-017, which is the Tremont Historic District, and it's the new construction of the apartment building at West 14th and Kenilworth. Mr. Secretary, do we have any comments from you?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to remind the commission that we tabled this item on June 25th, and we asked the applicants to look at some specific issues, including the parking issue and providing some kind of a master plan for parking, the future impacts of the project on the church and the rectory, the context, and how the building sits or fits in relation to the existing setbacks, to match the masonry on all elevations. So I'm hoping that the presentation today will focus on those issues. There was also a block club meeting earlier this week, and we received a lot of emails as a result of that meeting, and I'll report on those after the presentation.
Okay. Do we have a report from the local block club meeting commission?
Mr. Chairman, I think we should hold off on those until after the applicants have made their presentation.
All right, let's proceed with your presentation then.
And I believe we have Mr. Mason.
Good morning. So let's focus on the items that Don mentioned. I think we're all familiar with the project. If we could move to one more slide. There we go. So, could we go back? Yeah, perfect.
Site plan?
Yes. So again, in response to, there's been a lot of comment on setbacks, and I just want to reiterate, we are in compliance with what is required by zoning for this. We meet with the requirements of the urban form overlay, which asking for zero lot line, but they allow for a little bit of setback. What we've changed from last time is we've kind of pulled the entire building south off of Kenilworth a couple feet. We don't want to get any closer to that existing rectory than 10 feet. We still have 10.5 foot separation between our building and the existing what will now be a residence to the south. But we were able to, because the property line itself is inset from the sidewalk, give or take 12 inches on both Kenilworth and West 14th. On the Kenilworth elevation, or the Kenilworth street side, we were able to pull back an additional 2 feet. So we've got about 4 feet between the edge of the sidewalk and the face of the building, which will allow for kind of a planting strip where we can get some grasses or shrubbery. And then what we did at the corner where we had basically the elevated planter box on West 14th, we've turned that around the corner and run it, we extended it east into the building another 5 feet, so that it kind of holds and turns the corner and then becomes kind of planting bed at sidewalk level for the balance of the elevation of the building. Height is still within, we're less than what is permitted. We're at 59.5 feet, 60 feet is the cutoff. setbacks are compliant with requirements. Additionally, at the end of the proposal, the development teams provided me with LOIs for parking at the, and we may go one more slide if we could. I'm sorry, one more further. Thanks so much. The lower edge of the page, we have a parking area along parking area designated or identified along Starkweather Avenue, where 14 spaces have been discussed, and there's LOI provided for parking there, and then the next parking designations on Auburn Avenue, there are an additional 16 and 8 spaces that the development team has provided LOIs for. That's what the board asked for. The board asked for something in writing. That's what we have in writing today. I could tell you we've had discussions with Grace Hospital. They're not quite sure what they're doing with their property, so they're not willing to commit at this point. If and when we get there and there's something available, they're open to having discussions, but there isn't anything that we can provide for you concrete today. Have had some conversations with Andy at the museum. That's very close to the site, and it isn't something they've done in the past, but they're open to it, and it's something he's willing to take to the board. It hasn't transpired between our last meeting and this meeting. So again, we don't have anything on paper to present to you. And then finally, we've been speaking with Missy Ferschel, MCM across the park. And it's an office use on that beautiful redevelopment of that existing church, or what was previous church. They use the spaces during the day. Property management is looking at it, and there's a possibility we might come up with something there as well. But for today, it's just the two shown on the south edge of the page here. And those are the two differences between last time and this time. So there's no point in me going on.
Thank you very much. Comments from the commission, please. Can't hear. Maurice, I think you're muted.
Technology, there you go. Okay, we have Don Pettit, Ms. Jill Anderson, and Mr. Harrison.
Who was first?
Don Pettit.
Donald, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to report for the commission that we received 10 emails yesterday from members of the community, 9 opposed or with concerns about the project, and 1 in favor of the project. They came from Benjamin Cooper, Sheila Rock, Bonnie Flinner, Susan Reagan sent us a community statement with 23 names opposed to the project. Karen Abbott, Carla Mashmeyer, Kate O'Neill, the Tremont History Project, and John Rakowskis and Herb Crowther. Many of these were forwarded to the commission for review. We did ask that if there's anyone from the Block Club who would like to speak today, that we should limit it to one spokesperson. But I just wanted to report on all of those for the record.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I had an Isaac that was on the meeting and had to drop off and left a long comment. Did you want me to read it or post it in the chat? How would you?
Read it, please.
Okay. I would like to include the following comments regarding the parking issue on Lincoln Park Flats West. Parking minimums cause immense harm by worsening car dependence, hindering infill development, undermining walkable neighborhoods, blocking transit-oriented development, and by making real estate, including housing, less financially viable and less affordable. Many of our city's most desirable neighborhoods were developed before the invention of the automobile. These historic neighborhoods are the most walkable and some of the most desirable places to live, work, and play. I do not see why the Landmarks Commission is interested in providing car storage in one of our most walkable neighborhoods. This is a parking management issue in the neighborhood, not an issue car storage supply. Thank you. And then we also have Michelle Anderson, Mr. Harrison, and Annie Peace.
Ms. Anderson, please.
Thank you. I just wanted to comment that the parking spaces proposed are a good distance from the building. And based on what I was reading in some of the letters that came from the Block Club, I believe the parking area on Starkweather also is parking for another building in that area. The parking on Auburn is a good 2 blocks away from the property, and I think anybody carrying groceries, anything, they're going to find that really unmanageable.
We have Mr. Harrison.
Mr. Harrison, please.
Yes, to the architect, is there ADA accessibility for residents there, for drop-off of any sort, or would it just have to be out the front door, sort of thing?
No, that would most likely be accommodated off. There's the access drive off Kenilworth.
Okay.
And that would be accommodated off Kenilworth. And that's a provision that would be made. We don't want a lot of traffic back there, but that's where someone could pull in and drop somebody off. The first floor of the building will be accessible. So that would be the drop-off point.
So that part, you could drop off groceries and things like that as well?
You could. You certainly could.
Because I was going to suggest to you that perhaps if you could possibly squeeze in a turnaround in the front, that might solve a lot of these questions about accessibility and dropping off and things like that in that sort of open square that you have there. Unless that tree is in the way, I don't know.
It's a nice existing tree. I don't think the development team would object to that. I would really hate to lose that kind of little park. Do you know what I mean? Because I think that would be a very nice little space, but it could accommodate another access point. We could make a curb cut, and I think folks could pull in there and drop off as well.
I'm just trying to find some points of compromise, because
sure,
it really is coming down to this wall of resistance over parking. And I think that the more you could provide, access to a vehicle, even for a temporary moment, dropping off people, parking, Uber, whatever it might be, I think that might be, the path to final approval on something like this. So I know you've tabled this several times, but I think that we have to have some, there's going to have to be some movement somewhere or the other, whether it's, because the residents are very resistant to this without further parking solutions.
Understood.
Mr. Chairman, we have Annie Peace and then Matt Moss from City Planning.
Annie, please.
This is Annie Peace. Can you hear me all right?
Yes.
We can.
Thank you. I'm a nearby resident, but not part of the Tremont Block Club. I love Tremont and I really love Lincoln Park. I understand the project was tabled at the June meeting with the concern about no on-site parking. My comment is that with any new development comes change, and that change impacts the experience that people have in their neighborhood, and neighborhoods are and should be for people. So it's important that we understand those concerns and where you can address them. And so I really appreciate the Commission's attention to the community's concerns here. My concern with this project is that forcing the developer to build parking will actually bring more cars to this part of the neighborhood, exacerbating the concerns shared by the Block Club. I'm a 30-year-old resident looking forward to decades of living in Cleveland, hopefully raising a family. I recognize the importance of the development decisions that we're making here today and how those impact the future. To my knowledge, there aren't any other multifamily developments recently built in Tremont that were built without parking. So there are comparable products that offer private parking on site. In any healthy housing market, consumers have options. Some developments have parking, some don't. Developments without parking attract residents without cars. And for me, that's a really important thing for our neighborhood going forward. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have Matthew Moss next, then we have Khalid and Ms. Anderson as well.
Mr. Moss, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. As I've shared at the previous meetings, as both a neighborhood planner and having the privilege of also being a resident for this in this neighborhood, I live just south of the highway on West 14th Street. I know this has been a recurring issue. I agree with a lot of the comments that Ms. Pease just made about the commission really taking the time to understand and appreciate the comments and concerns from the community. I do want to echo one thing that was mentioned about how decisions we make today that have immediate impacts also have long-term impacts. And in terms of making decisions that impact issues like traffic and mobility, particularly in our neighborhoods, it might seem incremental now, but they do add up over time to produce long-term change. I did read the comments provided by some of the residents in the community, concerns about traffic, mobility, about street parking posing also a danger to vulnerable road users such as cyclists. I can tell you, as someone who is a vulnerable road user, I commute to and from City Hall, at least prior to COVID, on my bicycle on West 14th Street at least 5 times a day. And I can tell you that it's already a concern. Sometimes traffic, especially on the weekends, in terms of cars using parking and posing a risk to myself as a vulnerable road user. And while there are short-term interventions that need to be considered, long-term, investing in a city that allows people to move without a car is, to me, one of the safest things that can be done for road users like myself, and to provide a future for people to have freedom of choice in terms of where they live and how they move about the city. Because if we keep insisting on investing in off-street car storage, it makes it harder to get around on really any other mode. I understand and appreciate the concerns about parking from the residents. I really wish we had as much interest in that as much interest in transit viability and transit advocacy as we do in parking advocacy. It's a real concern of mine going forward, and I think this project is aligned with many of the goals in our master plan to create more pedestrian-friendly, walkable communities.
Thank you.
We had Khalid next, Mr. Chairman, and then we had Adrian Bailey. Oh, I'm sorry, we have Michelle. I'm sorry, I skipped over Michelle Anderson after Khalid. Go ahead, Khalid. Sorry.
Khalid.
Hi, everyone. I just wanted to make sure it's clarity on this. There's been a variety of opinions around the parking situation there. So a diverse neighborhood with diverse opinions. I will say, as far as from my professional perspective, we have not talked about investing in new parking. This is utilizing existing parking spaces, which would be a win as far as the urban form overlay, which reduced the number of parking space down to 32. Even though, so there, we're not going back to the history of this building and the size it was originally, and it's pretty much doubled. But doubled, and then the initial request for zero parking, which pretty much put people back on their heels as far as on-street parking only. And that was what was presented. But what we're talking about is using existing underutilized parking. And the developer says they have so letters of intent, as far as standards of who's using those current spaces, what times a day they're using those spaces. I guess that will come out at BZA or sometime, I guess. you know, I did ask them to do their homework on this, and you know, I guess I haven't seen the letters of intent or anything like that, so I guess I get them an income right now. But also, you know, they talk about these things as far as lifestyles and things of that nature. There's a significant cost advantage that they will have by not building these parking spaces on site. And we, as Tremont West, would like to see those costs affected in the rental structures and provide affordable housing for people who will most likely utilize active modes of transportation and transit. And that's all I have to say at this point in time.
Yes, we had Miss Anderson.
Ms. Anderson, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This project, again, does not have parking. There's other things about it that I strongly object to. We were talking about the parking, so I'll continue talking about the parking. In my 34 years in the real estate industry, the buildings that I see fail are often the ones without parking. As much as we have this aspiration of having people abandon their cars, I don't see any concrete evidence that this is happening on a large scale. My concern is that we are already seeing a glut of rental housing. A developer told a colleague of mine that he sees a 3-year supply of rental housing in the downtown area. I had a conversation with a large property owner in Ohio City, and he says he's offering first month rent free, which he hasn't done in a long time because there just are not enough people out renting these places. He said he rented a place to a gal who left Mariner's Watch on Detroit, which is a relatively new building, and she told him that the building was half empty. I just see this as being very risky. And, you know, unlike the buildings like the Chelsea or the Pelton on the corner there, these buildings are not that substantial. They're going to require, you know, more maintenance, more investment, you know, in the next 15, 20 years. And I just see the future as being really marginal for a lot of these buildings. I don't think the conditions are such that we can just keep building willingly. Sorry about that.
Okay. Ms. Bailey?
I'm glad that Mr. Colleen spoke as a representative from the local design review, so I can hear his comment. And also, this letter of intent was just put on, so that kind of answered one of my questions. But Mr. Dave, I know your last name. I'm reading off the screen. This alternative parking lot, how many parking spaces that can be used in relationship to the new construction and the tenants in the building? How many is being leased?
They have provided LOIs letters for 14 along Starkweather and another 16 and 8 on Auburn, so a total of 38. So in excess of the requirement by 6 more than is required. And again, we're continuing talks with neighbors that are in closer proximity to the building. We don't have anything concrete to report today, but as of today, 38 spaces, and our requirement is 32.
Well, one of my earlier comments from the previous presentations, I asked if you have studied putting parking on the site with the new construction. So I haven't, that was one of my comments in the past about putting some parking indoor, low grade. Have you looked at that?
We did. It's just, this is a long road we've been on. There's not a lot of site area there, and cars require a lot of area to maneuver around and ramps to get down. So building underground parking, it just, by the time you get down, turn around, you're going to get 3 to 5 cars. We're going to probably get 5 cars per level. Well, nobody can build a parking garage at 5 cars per level. It doesn't make any sense financially. It could never work out at the cost. So
that's understandable. So,
could Mr. Collier please mute his mic, please?
Oh, how many tenants overall in the new construction that's going to be able to use the parking? You said with 38, the alternative. So what's your total tenants in the new construction?
49 units. So with the urban form overlay, there's a 65% requirement, or a 35% reduction. So 32 is the number that are required. Again, and I know this is just a difference of opinion, but our hope is that the number in reality, all said and done, is 5. We really believe that this is going to operate the way some of the people believe that it will operate. And to Khalid's point, the development team has said from the start, the costs of these units are definitely going to be affected by the reality that the team did not have to invest in parking or structured parking or dedicate land to parking. That will be reflected in the cost of the units, and we think we'll snag those people, because why would they move away from the park to an adjacent opportunity? There's a lot of new starts in the neighborhood that do have parking, but if they're a little bit cheaper and beyond the park, I think we're going to easily get those folks. And no, there aren't thousands of them, but they're out there. We believe strongly that they're out there. So,
let me make one more comment, and then
sure.
And this is from Khalil, and it's a good question from him. Okay, your alternative parking lot is away from the new construction. How is security from, walking from that location to the building, lighting and all that? So have you looked at that?
We like Tremont. People like Tremont. I can't speak to the entire path. No, you're going to walk city sidewalks to and from with the parking that we have proposed today. The Starkweather's nice because it's just along the park, walking city sidewalks, but it's a beautiful, wonderful neighborhood that people want to be in. So are there risks? Certainly, but I think that's inherent in the decision to live there in the first place.
And yes,
Tremont, taking any additional measures, no.
Yes, I've been there 3 months. It is a beautiful neighborhood. So, all right, that's it.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. Strickland and then Director Collier.
Mr. Strickland, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll just start off by reiterating my support for this project, which I expressed in our last meeting. And if the developer has determined that there's a demand for apartments that don't provide parking because they intend to use alternate forms of transportation, all for that, for the reasons that have been articulated. I have a question about process for either the developer or Matt Moss. If we approve this project, with the developer proposing off-site parking at that distance, does that require a parking variance from the Board of Zoning Appeals, or would our approval be final? That's my question.
Mr. Chairman, I can speak to that if you'd like. Our zoning code permits property owners to meet off-street parking minimum requirements with other parcels that are owned by the same entity or that is within 400 feet. that can be used to meet the parking requirement and not require a variance. Oftentimes what we see, if a developer is unable to secure a lease or other property that they own directly within 400 feet, that's generally evidence that's taken to Board of Zoning Appeals in support of a parking variance. So if they own a parcel within 400 feet under the same entity, they can use that to meet the requirement and avoid the need for a variance. Otherwise, if they cannot own it or it's not within 400 feet, generally that's again presented as evidence in support of a variance by the developer.
Thank you. The chair recognizes Mr. Collier.
Let me just follow up and ask, Matt, so is this parking that's proposed within 400 feet? And if it isn't, does the applicant still require a variance?
We will. It's a little bit more than 400. It's more than 400 feet, so we will still require a variance.
Right. So for my commission, fellow commission members, I would point out that our decision is not final. I think we need to concentrate on the nature and character of the development and how it fits within the historic district, and primarily leave the parking concern to the Board of Zoning Appeals would be my opinion.
Mr. Chairman, we still had Director Collier. Did you wish to make a comment?
Yes, the chair recognizes Director Collier.
Thank you. And God forbid I make a comment and have an opinion as planning director without being blasted in a paper for being conniving or corrupt. So I do want to just call out a couple of things for consideration by the board. And obviously, because this will have to go to the Board of Zoning Appeals, there's going to be a whole another conversation. And one of the things I do want to say to the individuals on the phone is these boards and committees have a responsibility, and they're all appointed to make a determination as to what they believe is best for the city of Cleveland, with the testimony provided by council people, city staff, myself, God forbid, and the community. And we may not agree. And I just hope that, people respect, the opinions of everyone, and that you don't carry it with you in the form of anger and slander. And just forgive me for saying that, but I wanted to preface my comments by saying that. Now, with respect to this particular project, there's a couple of things. This is a bus corridor, correct, Matt?
There is a bus line on West 14th, yes.
Thank you. The other thing is that this does fall under the zoning classification of the urban form overlay. The developer has identified some alternative parking solutions. With respect to the location of this and the fact that it's rental, just over the last decade, there was a time in the early, 2000s where you couldn't find a rental product in the city of Cleveland. And most people were getting apartments in Richmond Heights and, surrounding suburbs because you couldn't find a quality rental product. And now we're seeing quite a bit of that. And that rental product has led to some of the growth in population that you see downtown and in some of our trending neighborhoods. How much is too much, I think will be determined by our 10-year housing study, which is going to be something that the Community Development Department is going to be embarking on this year. So I understand the point that was made earlier, but the need for diverse housing product, particularly rental, I think is important. The other thing here with respect to how this is sited, and as I look at this site plan and I see the park and I see the buildings that are outlined in black, and I look at the block of West 14th, and I notice how this building in the black that we're referring to and the one south of that on the end actually bookend this block pretty nicely. You have two bookend buildings that they look like they're equidistant with respect to the setbacks. So with respect to how the building sits in the scale, that's something I do not have an issue with. The other, piece of this that I think is, important is the fact that by you having a situation where you have, bus access, you do have vehicular access, and you also have a neighborhood. So what that means in my mind is that people have options. And when you think about the fact that you're putting in a product where you have considerable amenity, and you also have the option to take a bus, have parking, and also, have other access to different modes of transportation, not to mention the proximity to downtown and to other thriving districts is pretty robust. So, taking all of that into account, I tend to lean toward supporting this project because there are options. This is not necessarily a situation where you're creating a development that's isolated, that has no amenity, that has no choices for the marketability of the units. And I think that this level of density, the scale and the height, overlooking the park, and I said this in the beginning, is a huge asset to this neighborhood. So that's where my thoughts are currently. And I think that the points that the Development Corporation made are valid. There's no question about it, and this is one of those things where, you do have to assess the risk, with respect to some of the concerns that were raised. But when I get in situations where there's a challenge with making a decision, I just ask myself, does the benefits outweigh the burdens? And that's often how I lean with basically making a determination as to, what, I would personally support as planning director and what our department would support. So I just wanted to say that. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Any other comments?
Mr. Chairman, we have Khalid, and then we have Mr. Harrison, and then Ms. Anderson.
Khalid, please.
Oh, and Ms. Bailey.
Yeah, so as we shift gears towards the building, there is a concern that came up in the community, especially in the local historic group, as far as the height of the building, and whether they felt that 4 stories would be more appropriate and not shadow the existing historic buildings along West 14th, as well as the Holy Ghost Church. They felt strongly about that and wanted, and that's definitely in at least one, if not multiple, of the letters that went to the commission. And at that point, I believe you would be looking at 39 units instead of 49, but still a significant site. Still within, I think it probably would be an attractive development, and also check off things as far as some of the concerns that other people may have had as well.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Harris, please.
You're muted, sir.
Sorry, just real quickly, I think a breakthrough comment from me was from, and I can't remember who it was, saying that building without parking attracts residents who don't have cars. And I think that's a really wonderful thing that would bring a new layer to the texture of Tremont. So that was very helpful. Also, Director Collier, I would just say to you that with regard to your preamble, that with celebrity and fame come scrutiny. So I'm sure that's why you were in the paper, not because of anything that was issue there. And then you also said something that I was going to raise with regard to this image that's on the screen here, which is that this building as designed now really provides a bookend to that side of the square with the church at the other end. And I think the setbacks are certainly appropriate. And I really feel that we need a weighty building at that end. And finally, my colleague, Mr. Strickland, I could not agree with you more that it's really our purview to discuss the design of this building, not so much the parking of it. And so I would take issue with the design review's idea that it should be lower, because I feel that with this broad, well, if we could go, is there a picture that shows the facade of this building as planned now? There we go. With this broad cornice and frieze there, it needs that height. Otherwise, it's just going to look like a stump that was lowered. And it needs that height. It's more imposing. It's a better work of architecture with this particular height. I wish it were actually 10 stories high with such a wide frieze. But I think that it will look impressive at this height, and I think it's on the commercial, it's on the city end of it, the sort of downtown end of the park. It provides a connection with the architectural context around that particular corner with that large imposing building adjacent. So I really feel like the design is where it needs to be at this point, and I would support this building.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. Ms. Anderson.
And then Miss Bailey.
Yeah. Michelle?
Oh, you're muted, ma'am.
Thank you. I still design inappropriate in that the height does overwhelm the other historic buildings in the area. I don't think it conforms to the rhythm, the setback, or just the general nature of that block and that street. I brought this up in the last meeting, and it's still a deep concern of mine. What is the plan for the Holy Ghost Church? What are the conditions of the Holy Ghost Church? Supposedly that roof has been fixed, but there's a tarp that's forlornly wrapped around the back onion dome, and part of that onion dome is missing. And my concern is still allowing water infiltration into the church. I don't know if anybody from the city has checked that out, but it's a deep concern of mine. I know we're kind of a broken record on the parking, but again, schlepping groceries from 2 blocks away is just not practical. And I'm not convinced that there's a stampede of people without cars that are coming to commit construction. Construction is inherently more expensive to, it's got to be more expensive price point than, a house that's cheaper. Thank you.
One last comment.
Thank you, Michelle. Ms. Bailey, please.
For bringing up the drawing. I see that Mr. David brought the masonry up to the 5th floor, so that looks much better. And that scheme is around all the elevation. I like that. Back to the parking. Appreciate you coming up with an alternative way for alternative parking. Is there any, and the letter is your intent as part voting on this design. is the Grace Hospital is the entity that's gonna to build and design the parking. You'll come back to the commission with that later? Or is it one there now? Because I'm looking at it in Google. Is there parking there now, or is it something that has to be developed, built?
What we proposed did not include anything with Grace Hospital. Again, in speaking with Grace Hospital, they don't know what they're doing with their land just yet, so they're not committing to anything. But I mean, you know, the gentleman I spoke with was a really nice guy, and he's like, look, when the time comes, if we haven't done anything and you could use some spaces, we'll have the conversation, we'll be open to it. But at this stage of the game, they have property in Tremont, so, you know, they don't know what, they can't commit because they don't know what they're doing.
Okay, so
wait, nothing there yet. Short answer, sorry.
Okay, right now it's just, there's no parking there. It has to be developed. Sorry about that, I had my window open. That's what I wanted to get understanding right now.
The LOIs are just for along Starkweather and Auburn.
Okay, all right. All right, that's all I need to know. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we had Director Collier with his hand raised again, and I think Mr. Harrison as well, and Mr. Moss.
The chair recognizes Director Collier, please.
Yes, just briefly, and I want to make sure this is taken into context. I believe that, you know, the project is, from a design perspective, well done. I would not, however, be opposed to a unit reduction if it comes down to a sticking point with this issue of parking. You know, the design can still be achieved if you lower the height. I wouldn't be against that, and I just want to go on the record saying that, although I'm fine with the design that I'm seeing. But I think that the community benefits better for this project happening than sitting on an empty parking lot like that. And I think that if it's necessary to move this forward, and there's an appetite by other board members for the prospect of a slight unit count reduction, and if the developer interest is, you know, open to that, I know the community has expressed their concerns, you know, just from my perspective, I would be open to that, but I'm fine either way because I think the project design is a good one. So I just wanted to put that out there. Thank you.
Thank you, Director.
Mr. Harrison said he lowered his hand, so we have Mr. Moss.
The chair recognizes Mr. Moss.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just wanted to make a quick point. I know there were some comments made about the parking really being the purview of the Board of Zoning Appeals, but I believe, based on the floor plans that the developer submitted, that there actually is internal parking on every floor of this building. It's parking for bicycles. As someone who lives, like I said, in Tremont without a car, I use my bike as my primary mode of transportation, and the only internal parking that I have is space that I create in my apartment. So I don't have those options, and those options are pretty limited in the city of Cleveland. So I just wanted to reiterate that point in case it was overlooked or otherwise commission members weren't aware.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. Dreyer.
Mr. Dreyer, please.
My one problem with the project is really that I think the church is being ignored. In previous meetings, the developer has acted like, you know, they can't do anything with the church, and I realize it's a hard structure to redevelop. Not the least of which because we have a number of empty church buildings in this city, like a lot of big cities. But my biggest concern with this new building is it blocks the church, and the church is, as Ms. Anderson has pointed out, the maintenance of the church already is under question, and I'm very concerned about demolition by neglect. So at this now, the parking in my mind has been answered because I think we just asked for some evidence, and we have the evidence. So it's really this church building that is the historical landmark on the site that I'm worried about. So it's hard for me to support this project under the present situation.
Thank you, Mr. Cook. Any other comments?
We have no more hands raised at this point.
Okay, well, I would like to say a few things myself. One is, again, we are here because of the historical district and two historical buildings. I mean, Tremont is actually famous throughout the country and some parts of Europe as having a very large composition of very beautiful, very historical churches. Greek, Lebanese. This one happens to be Ruthenian, which is a lost group of Christians that came into this country, and mostly in Pennsylvania with a secondary group here in Cleveland. And to me, it seems the church and the directory have not been discussed, and they seem to be, will end up completely isolated and somewhat dysfunctional because we haven't heard a word about the use of these two structures. And that's a concern. I agree with Mr. Collier that the height, I think, is a factor mostly because it dwarfs the historical buildings. But also more significantly, I mean, I've lived in Europe a long time. It's probably the highest concentration of no parking residences in the world. But when I go there, bringing groceries, from 3 or 4 blocks away, as wonderful as it is, when it's a nice, lovely day, so my friends who live in Rome, who live in Milan, the desire to be able to drive up to the structure and leave to drop off some basic essentials is one comment that's constantly made. So if it's a winter night or a rainy day, having to walk 3 or 4 blocks to bring your basic groceries and your functioning furniture, whatever you bring in your home on a regular basis, is going to be a serious task. And I agree that we have, bus stations and bus stops nearby, and I also agree with the principle of urban living. But we don't really have a strong history in this country, especially in Cleveland, of having absolutely no parking where you live. So we have the beautiful West Side Market close by. Yes, I love to walk there. I love to bring my groceries back to Tremont, but I don't want to do it when it's cold or cold. So that's an issue for me. So I'm a little more relaxed about this whole parking concept. Although the idea of parking 2 or 3 blocks away doesn't really make a lot of sense to me. But my main concern right now is having comfortable and easy access to your living unit. And I think also the church. The church is a significant historical structure, architecturally, historically. It is part of the body of the ethnic diversity of Cleveland. And to just kind of focus on this new building without some consideration, some serious consideration about the church and the historical rectory is still a major issue with me. Thank you. That's it for now.
Mr. Chairman, I'm not sure, Ms. Anderson, did you still have your hand raised? You're muted.
I'm sorry, I did. I am again concerned about the disposition of the surrounding buildings on that general parcel. If this city was 1 iota more differential to historic preservation as it is to new development, we would probably have so many more amazing structures. The amount of architecturally important structures that are gone from the city is heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking. We continue to minimize the importance of the architectural fabric that has created the city, that made it. We were one of the greatest cities. We were like the richest city in the country at the turn of the century. And we built buildings that exemplified that. And we have no appreciation for them. We have no love for them. We dwarf them with, you know, new developments so we can get more taxpayers into the city. And yet I think we do that at our peril. I think that is short-term thinking. And I think we need to stop it. We need to stop that now. And we need to embrace Cleveland for the built environment that was created for us, instead of minimizing it and diminishing it by structures like this and by development like this that, again, dwarfs the church. There's no consideration for what's going to happen to the church. Even that the rectory's in question, it's showing up as a listing under contract with the buyer, but at the last meeting, the developer said, oh no, there is no buyer. So we don't know what's going on this lot. We really don't. And I certainly cannot support this project, and I question, why are we here? Why are we here? We're not here to, you know, support urban form overlay. We're here for historic preservation. We're here to respect the historic district. And I think we're derelict. We're derelict by not doing that, by not seeing the totality of this and just focusing on, you know, the height of the building and where the brick is. So yeah, I not only can I not support this project, but I'm frankly a little bit disgusted, and you know, and a little frustrated. I really do think that we need to embrace and love our history, and we have not done that. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle.
Mr. Chairman, we have Kate O'Neill, and we also have someone who's identified as SM. I'm not sure who that is, and that's it.
Ms. O'Neill.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you, everybody, for hearing our concerns. My name is Kate O'Neill. I am a co-chair of the Block Club for Auburn Lincoln Park. So we have not seen such activity in this Block Club in years as we have lately concerning this project. Tremendous, strong language at meetings and in letters. And thank you for receiving the letters and giving them consideration. I think the most important points to leave you with is a concern that ignoring only a 3-year-old urban overlay plan and changing the requirements for this parking set a dangerous precedent that has a lot of people concerned that future projects will come to us and say, we don't need any parking. So that puts a tremendous demand on this neighborhood and important arteries such as 14th Street and this intersection in particular. Mr. Collier, we've been discussing the benefits versus burdens discussion also. We would like to support development that is a good match for the neighborhood, but the concerns that this is not a match and creates more trouble invites the question that the burdens outweigh the benefits. I think almost everybody comes back to a congestion issue. If the only approach to the building is one westerly access point, where every FedEx truck, UPS, Uber Eats, Lyft and Uber pickups and drop-offs and visitors and parents, that all is into a one-way alley, the lineup of traffic to access that and wait their turn just adds traffic to Kenilworth, or invites a jam up on 14th and blocks a bike lane. And everybody who is using it as a pedestrian crosses all those paths also. So the concern is tremendous. Please give consideration to all of the letters you have. I don't need to go through all the points, but those are the biggest concerns, I think, that come up in summary. There is a group that asked the developers to be in touch with St. Augustine. I don't know that's ever happened, but their concerns for the use of their space on 14th would be severely hindered. And the services they provide are varied and long and full day, full week, full year. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Anyone else?
We have, Mr. Chairman, we have SM. I'm not sure who that is. We
Okay,
also have Director Collier, and I'm not sure if Matt Moss again.
okay, well, let's hear from MS, you said?
SM.
SM, okay. SM,
Go ahead, sir, or ma'am. We cannot hear you.
okay, let's go to Director Collier then.
Yes, so thank you. And I don't want to belabor this, but I do want to just say to my fellow board member, Ms. Anderson, that Ms. Anderson, I hear you loud and clear. And I, personally have concerns with respect to preservation in the city of Cleveland. It wasn't until I spent some time in Germany, in Leipzig and Berlin and a number of other cities where my respect for historic preservation grew. And it's in that time I really understood what preservation was. And I also became very clear as to why the issue of preservation exists in Cleveland. And I personally believe it's because of the lack of investment in our historic structure, not because of new investment. I don't see us just tearing down historic structures to build new. What I do see, however, is new investment filling in the gaps that vacancy and blight left in neighborhoods across the city over many, many decades. And what we're replacing it with is urban living. With respect to this particular site, though, and to your point, and this is part of the reason why I raised my hand again, in consideration of the point that was made about the church that rests next to this particular site, and indicated that, from my perspective, even though I know you fall in the other hemisphere with respect to this project as staunchly opposing, from my perspective, and given what you said, the notion of, a reduction in unit count, hence the height, because you don't have to necessarily compromise the design in order to achieve that, is something I will be open to considering. And again, I'm a vote just like everyone else. I exercise no extra authority with making my vote, in my opinion. But I do want to put in context your sentiments and let you know that I think all of the board members heard, understand, and agree with the statement that we need to do better by our historic structures, no question. But the problem lies in the financial realm, not the land development realm. Most of our new products that are coming online are filling in gaps. And if you look downtown, there's a lot of preservation that's happening. There is some preservation in some of our most thriving neighborhoods as well. And I can run down a laundry list of those. So I just want to just put that in context and just let you know, I believe and understand, your feelings about that, but just the root cause, I believe, from what I've witnessed over my 20 years here in this professional space, is the fact that it's a financial matter, not one of benign neglect. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, I believe we have Mr. Messina is SM. Do you want to comment, sir?
Okay.
Yep. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Oh, fantastic. I think I was double muted. Sorry about that. Been listening. Thank you all for the comments and feedback, obviously. Update on the adjacent items, the adjacent buildings. The home, if you will, is under contract with a single family home buyer, I believe owner occupier, from what I understand. I could be mistaken. So that seems to be on track to get fully renovated in the near future for a single family home, as everybody kind of nodded their head to best use. So we're hopeful that that's on track to come to fruition here in the coming 30 days or so. The church, we have engaged since our last meeting with the City of Cleveland folks on highest and best use. No agreement's been put in place, but we're hopeful we can come to some agreement on what that highest and best use is and put those wheels into motion. Understand we've got 3 pieces to this pie. This is obviously the most important to the developer. It's $8 million worth of economic development we're putting on the table. And you know, unfortunately, we can't do 3 projects at once. So our secondary focus will be the church, and we're looking for input.
Thank you. Any other comments?
We have Mr. Moss.
Mr. Moss, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just have a brief comment about concerns about drop-off around the area. One thing we commonly look at as these projects like this, if they move forward, is the impact on traffic and traffic volumes and traffic behavior in the area, whether it's pedestrian, bike, or car. And we do work with our traffic engineering department to assess the on-street parking conditions there and see if we can, we have the option to sign a pick up and drop off zone in that replaces a few on-street parking spaces, either 24 hours of the day or between specific time windows to then allow parking in the evenings or in the early mornings. So that's something we will be looking at as this project, if it proceeds to Board of Zoning Appeals, as a solution to address traffic and circulation.
Okay, thank you. Any other comments?
Just one comment, Mr. Chair, if I may, before we take a vote. If you, you look down the block and you think about the restoration of the old church by, I think it's Andrew Brickhouse.
Yes.
In Tremont, and there's other examples of conversions of these church buildings that are older. Nowhere near, obviously, to the scale in which the need is, because you have a substantial amount of fabric. But we have some really great examples of adaptive reuse. And I think part of what you have to do is just kind of rethink how these historic structures interplay with some of the new investments on the lots that are adjacent to them. You have a lot of historic fabric in the midst of very blighted areas that are going to need reinvigoration, and how that mix happens, I think, is extremely important. And, that's really what this dialogue right here is about, is the interface between the two. Because at the end of the day, the one thing I will stand on is the fact that this lot should be developed. And it creates a huge opportunity, in the neighborhood. The debate is, how is that done? And, just going back to my original posture about this, the church is significant. You have a new investment next to a building that has definitive historic significance. And, what's that right balance? And I think that's really what the question is for me.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Mr. Chairman, we have Ms. Bailey, we have Corey from Tremont West, and we also have Mr. Harrison.
The chair recognizes Ms. Bailey.
Yes. I don't have any problem with the height as is, or if the developer lower it. There's the terrace, Tremont Terrace at the corner. That might be an example of height to duplicate. If you lower it, at least you'll see the steeples, the 2 steeples of the church. But I don't have any problem with the current height. Or if they lower it, you'll see the steeple and lower it, like be close to the height of the apartment building at the corner.
Okay. Thank you. The chair recognizes Corey Reeder from Fremont West.
Thank you, and I apologize for not being able to join earlier. My wife had her wisdom teeth taken, 2 of her wisdom teeth taken out today, so I was moving her around, but she's settled now. I would. And so I missed a lot of it, and I apologize. I would just go back to the letters that you received from the community, and that there's still a lot of work that needs to be done with the developer and the community and building trust that this is the right development for the site. And frankly, that hasn't been done. And I would hate to think that the residents of the neighborhood and the block club and the Economic Development Committee is disregarded with their concerns. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Harrison.
Yes, I'm very glad Director Collier brought up the church across the park. That is a model for the preservation of the church. However, this body in an earlier composition and iteration allowed the tearing down of a house in order to provide access to the rear and for this gigantic parking lot that was put there. I don't know if it needed all that parking because of the zoning at the time or what, but almost no one parks there now. And so a house came down, to Michelle Anderson's point, a house came down in order to put parking in. And so I'm personally, like Mr. Strickland, ready to move on from this parking issue. And I think Matt Zone's point about working with Department of Engineering in order to provide a drop-off zone on 14th Street or even on the Kenilworth side would alleviate the question about what to do with groceries at night or during the cold rain. If there is to be any reduction of this design, it needs to, I'm afraid, I would not support it just being lowered. You have to rethink where the brick facade comes in relation to the cornice, because you have to bear in mind perspective. It has to be taken into consideration with regard to height, and that's the whole point about it. So if the building were to be reduced, the building would also, the facade would have to, the brick would have to go up. So you would have to raise the brick in order to not have this giant cap, which was originally designed for a story higher, or else the building's just going to look terrible. So please bear that in mind when suggesting that the building be reduced. I don't think really it needs to be reduced. If it's reduced at all, just reduce the back part of it, not the portion that's on the West 14th, because there needs to be a strong corner element. That is an essential part of a block that bookends something like a park. And so just as at the other end, there is a church with a steeple, this building provides a strong cornerstone to that arc of houses. And it does not overwhelm them, in my view, along 14th Street. It's debatable whether it overwhelms the church, but you know, if that's the case, then I would only advocate lowering the back part, because the front part really, as designed now, it has integrity and perspective. If it's lowered, it must be redesigned.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison. I would like to say a couple more things here. Obviously, we have a series of issues here that we haven't touched upon because we seem to be focused on this parking situation. So I think maybe we should take one of these things at a time. We have an historical church and a historical house that, with the construction of this building, this apartment building, will be completely isolated and partially made dysfunctional. The owner really hasn't addressed these two issues at all. He mentions that they may be selling the house. The house has been for sale since the purchase of the property. And the church will be completely and totally isolated. It will be just a sore point hidden behind an apartment building, which to me is a major issue, mostly because I didn't see really any effort on the owner's part to come up with a solution for these two structures, or a useful solution for these two structures. I get the feeling they want to get rid of them, get it done, and focus on the apartment building. The apartment building, I'm softer on this whole idea of parking or lack thereof, but I am really concerned about servicing. I mean, I'm familiar with urban settings and deliveries and pickups, UPS services, groceries. We need some kind of a service entrance, a service driveway or something where this building, independent of parking for the residences, the services that these residences will have to rely on just to live on a daily basis. The other issue, I think, well, the height also, I mean, my major concern for the height is the dwarfing of the church and relatively hiding the house that we have disapproved demolition for because it is an historical house. So somehow to make this whole corner a little more human, a little more considerate of its historical value. And I agree with Mr. Harrison. Once this is done, it will become a major point of view, but it doesn't have any comparison to the church at the other side of Lincoln Park, and nor to the other residential areas, catty corner from the structure. So I think, we've spent a lot of time, rightly so, on these issues where the building interacts with its residences and the neighbors. We really haven't discussed enough time, I think, with the actual nature of the building, the aesthetics of the building, and the impact that the building has on the two historical districts. So I'm at a loss as far as what needs to be suggested. I suppose we could put it to a vote if someone wants to entertain a motion to approve or disapprove, then we can perhaps consider some of the conditions. And again, we will in some way be back to where we are right now and to where we were a couple of weeks ago. So one, the aesthetics of the actual building itself. You touched upon it, Mr. Harrison touched upon it, but really inconclusively, I think. This parking situation, let's just put aside for a second the actual parking for the residences and consider some type of service parking for the residents there. And in which case, reducing the height of the building not only would be aesthetically pleasing as far as giving some space, breathing space to the church and to the recreate, but also reducing the number of residences there that would require services and some form of parking. I mean, I understand the economics, and I think new structures are necessary. Tremont, for the last 15, 20 years has been transformed as a community. So there's no objection here to something new and something fresh. But I think we need to keep thinking in terms of this building becoming an historical landmark building 50 or 60 or 100 years from now, or automatically becoming a historical landmark building because it is in an historical district. I think that's all I have to say.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to remind everyone that when you're done making a comment, please lower your hand so I know whether to call on you again or not. Right now, we have Ms. O'Neill and Ms. Anderson with their hands raised.
Ms. O'Neill, please.
Oh, I think she's done.
Ms. Anderson?
Thank you. I just want to say I'm not against new construction per se. That would be ridiculous. We have to move forward. I want to address something that Director Collier commented on about redevelopment, new development. And, I'm in real estate. The numbers have to work. And I don't recall what developer paid for this entire property. They are selling off the house for approximately $150,000. I would think that with what they paid for the property, they could redevelop the church, create something new that's to scale for the neighborhood and that would be embraced by the neighborhood and not scorned by the neighborhood, and still make it economically viable. Don't think they need to put 3949 units in this parcel in order to make it work, to make the numbers work.
Well, I agree with that. I agree. I think, you know, I always thought the church could be an addition to a new apartment building, which would accomplish a number of things, make it functional, make it useful, and make it living. So it would be, in this regard, the church is actually in great shape. I mean, it's an older building that has some issues, but most of the roof was repaired years ago. But obviously it has issues of an older building, but it's not decrepit. That's actually a very fine masonry structure. So to somehow incorporate that into this building would be a fantastic idea, I think. But I guess one of my concerns is that no consideration by the owners had really, to me, I got the distinct impression, clear impression, that the rectory and the church are a burden and they need to be gotten rid of. And I, unfortunately, purchased the property and those two issues needed to be dealt with. Okay, so they're selling the house and it's going to be residential. But the house has been for sale for a year and a half. I'm not sure why it hasn't been purchased yet. And the church has just been sitting there without any consideration. Something should be said about these two structures more definitively. All right, any other comments?
We have no hands raised at this point. We do have a couple comments in the chat window.
Okay. Who are they?
Mr. Reardon from Tremont West writes, the numbers worked when it was a much smaller building with parking when they were requesting the demo of the rectory.
Okay.
At least to what they were proposing at the time. And that's all I have.
All right, so if we are not ready to take a vote, then would we consider tabling again? Is that a possibility? Would the owners approve to another tabling, or do we want to go ahead and take a vote?
What would be the reasoning behind tabling again?
Because of all these unresolved issues. I mean, we still don't know. We still have an issue with the height. We still have an issue with not so much parking, because we may be finding parking across the park and walking, you know, 1,000 feet to get to our house. But that's an issue that we are saying now is going to the city for approval. And the issue of some kind of a service entrance, I think that so many people have brought up, including the neighborhood group. I'm just asking, if we want to go ahead and take a vote, and I entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. Strickland and Mr. Mason with their hands raised.
Okay, Mr. Strickland, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Obviously, I've been sitting here listening to this whole discussion. One point that was raised for consideration was keeping the 5-story structure that faces West 14th Street and consider the possibility of lowering that back portion of the apartment building so that the existing church structure is not lost with this new development. It reduces the parking burden somewhat, and it allows the church to still be visible when proceeding southbound on West 14th. So I'm wondering, before we table, if the developer would consider that as a possibility.
Mr. Strickland, may I say something in relation to what Mr. Strickland just said? You know, one of the possibilities is to partially remove one of the lower floors to create some type of entrance driveway for service vehicles and services. In which case, I think maybe the 5th floor in the front would make some more sense and maybe reduce the back to give the church some room. I think this I have a lot of experience in the issues. As I said before, my friends in Italy, that's the one constant issue that they have. Getting groceries and regular services and mail deliveries and UPS and into these buildings. Sometimes, you can't park on the main streets. And you have some of my friends actually walking 2 blocks to pick up a package from UPS in Rome or Milan. So I think that factor to me is significant. And yeah, I think in conjunction with Mr. Strickland, just inquires about some of these issues. Are we on?
Yes.
Would the owner like to comment and respond to that inquiry?
I didn't catch the entire inquiry. Maybe I had technical difficulties. It was a little bit in and out. Was the ask to?
Well, Mr. Strickland
I'm not sure what the ask.
Robert, do you mind repeating what you suggested?
Yeah, I just, based on all this conversation, we're trying to provide input so that if this project is tabled, you have a more clear direction in a way to proceed so that the vote would be successful. So my question was, would there be a consideration lowering the back portion of the building so that the existing church structure was not so obscured by the new development? So maintain the 5 stories in the front and consider a reduction in the back. And I just wanted to know if, you have to do the math for your development pro forma, but I wanted to know if that would be a consideration possible.
Well, I think we've been through a lot of iterations of the project, architecturally, structurally, along with running the development pro forma in parallel. I give you a short answer. The short answer is, are we open for discussions? Yes. Am I open for tabling? No. I don't. I mean, we discussed this in depth at the last meeting, and the same concerns were brought up, and here we are. I'm just not understanding, the continuous tabling. I guess I'm having a hard time understanding what issues may or could potentially continue to arise architecturally. I thought we had it nailed. We've had a lot of positive feedback over the last 6-8 weeks, and here we are with a new issue at time of vote. So I'm gonna speak for the development team and decline to table and go to vote. Thank you.
Okay. And then the consideration of making some type of a hotel-like drive-through to service the building. That's something that you would consider?
Yeah, I mean, we're working out the logistics of I guess a drop-off pickup. I think to the west of the building, off of Kenilworth, we do have a short drive, and how that's manipulated and final designed with civil engineering in place. Right. Yeah, I mean, yes, absolutely. If it's convenient for the building and the tenants, absolutely. I mean, there's something to be said for convenience.
Okay, would it require returning to landmarks, or could we be settled by committee?
Well, typically how we do it is post-approval. We release Mr. Mason, excuse me, on a permit set of drawings, and we'll take that input and make sure that there's a equitable solution for that convenience portion of the project. That's typically how we operate. We don't go too far out on a limb doing permit drawings. We keep them conceptual. And obviously, as we progress and publish progress sets, sure, we'll definitely take that into consideration and try to get the right solution with the project.
Mr. Chairman, we have Khalid has typed in the chat window. Do you support reducing the back half by a story and have it go towards a vote? And Ms. Bailey, never mind with Ms. Bailey.
Okay.
So
And then we also have Mr. Harrison with his hand raised. Sorry.
Is Khalid on right now? Is Khalid speaking, or I can't hear?
No, I was, am I muted? No. No, I was reading Khalid's message in the text.
Okay.
And then we also have Mr. Harrison with his hand raised.
Mr. Harrison, please.
You're muted, sir. You're muted, sir. Mr. Harrison, you're muted.
So sorry. I was going to move us to a vote, but I think Khalid has a very valid question. So could the developer please answer that question? Do you support reducing the back half by a story and having it go towards a vote?
Well, it's not that simple. There's exercises, construction estimating, redraw, construction estimating, fill in the blanks in the pro forma, spit it out and say it works or it doesn't work. That's not something I can perform on this call.
Well, could, to the vice chairman, could we make a motion that carries with it, some stipulations that certain things need to come back to us in final form? If they are going to be thinking about that, we could ask them, could we not, to think about the question of this back building and the driveway, as well as entering in discussions with the city to make a drop-off zone or something like that, and have that come back to us. Couldn't we give conditional approval?
I think we could do that. I also think, you mentioned it several times, we haven't discussed the actual aesthetics of the building, the materials, the samplings, and et cetera, et cetera. We've been so focused on these parking issues and service issues that we really haven't discussed the aesthetics of the building. He mentioned that many changes have been made from the original proposal, but I don't really see any major changes in this building from the.
Oh yeah, no. It has. It started as a sort of hotel-like structure that really went all the way down 14th Street to this structure, and then it had this overscaled cornice, which has been now reduced back into scale in my opinion, a much better scale. And then that did not continue around to the Kenilworth side. And I believe it was Ms. Bailey who requested that. And I think this looks much, much better now on this side. And I do think we discussed, if I'm not mistaken, the materials at the very first meeting, because I remember commenting upon the brick being, a color that really went very well with the older brick building just adjacent across the corner. So I do think that they've worked very hard to answer our questions architecturally, but I would propose a motion to approve this proposal with the stipulation that further consideration of lowering the back half of the building along Kenilworth, one story, be considered and answered to this board. In other words, the developer is quite right that they have to be allowed to put plug it into the matrix and see if it works. But and also consider a drop-off zone and a further accessibility for the residents. Does that make sense?
Yes,
as a proposal?
It does make sense, and I would just like that one thing is we need to have, a clear resolution of what the destiny of the church is going to be in this project. Will it be sold? Is that the idea? Will it be utilized in some form or other with this project, which apparently doesn't seem to be the case? So what is our review, our purpose for the incredible building, which is the church?
Well, I would toss it over to my colleague, Mr. Strickland, because he has a way of coming up with motions and resolutions that get to the heart of every issue. So, Mr. Strickland, please you're much more articulate than I with making these proposals.
Mr. Strickland?
Thanks, Mr. Harrison.
Can I interrupt one? Mr. Pettit did have his hand raised. I didn't know if there was something important that he wanted to make a comment on before you proceed.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I just want to point out that anything that happens to the church or the rectory in the future will have to come back to the commission.
Okay.
I appreciate your desire to have a plan for those two buildings, but I'm not sure that needs to be contingent on the motion that Mr. Harrison just proposed.
Mr. Harrison has not proposed a motion. He has offered the motion proposing to Mr. Strickland.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Harrison.
Mr. Chairman, I'd also like to call out that Mr. Reardon from Tremont West has been typing comments into the chat window. I don't know if you want me to read them or if everybody could read them for themselves.
I think you should read them, please.
He starts off with, why is everybody bending over backwards to get a development that is not supported by the neighborhood at this time? What is the community benefit of this building? Dealing with affordability? No. Dealing with parking issues of residents? No. And I don't believe going to the Flying Monkey was something that I needed to read. And then dealing with the additional historic structures that were part of the overall purchase? No. And those are all the comments.
Thank you.
Okay, this is Bob Strickland again. So I'll weigh in that, John Carlo, I don't think it's necessary to couple consideration of this apartment building development with the future development of the church. As Secretary Pettit pointed out, both the rectory and being in the historic district and the church itself will have to come back to this commission for consideration when a development plan is developed. So in terms of formulating a motion here, I would be stronger in the language than what was proposed by Mr. Harrison, and not just say that it's a consideration, that not compelled to go forward with this development based on our vote. So it's up to him ultimately as to how he wishes to proceed. So I put forth the motion that it's a absolute stipulation that the back portion of the apartment building be reduced by 1 story to improve the visibility of the historic structure, and that a drop-off zone must be developed for a temporary drop-off either on West 14th or on Kenilworth as part of the final plan. That's my motion.
We have a motion. Do we have a second?
We have Ms. Anderson and Mr. Harrison with their hands raised.
Ms. Anderson, please.
And you're muted, ma'am.
A very brief comment. I think without access, without parking, this church is going to be a lot harder to redevelop in the future. we have so little land in Tremont. There just isn't a lot of property to be developed, especially in this section of Tremont. The city can and has a right to be demanding that development takes place that is consistent and conforming with the historic character of the neighborhood. It's something that I embrace, celebrated by the neighborhood. You know, it's, and again, the economics should be viable here. So, you know, I just think, you know, we're dropping the ball, and we're going to continue to do that. I just wanted to bring that up.
Thank you. And I agree. I think the church from day one, I mean, again, we are here because of an historical structure. And yet we're talking about a new structure is the only subject on the table. But we have a motion and a second. Are we ready to take a vote?
Wait, who seconded?
Who's the second?
We do not have a second yet.
Who seconded?
We don't have one yet.
Oh, we don't have it. Okay.
My hand is raised.
Mr. Harrison.
I intend to second this motion, but I do want to say that the church and the house are extremely important to the ultimate plan of this site. So I look forward to reviewing those works later when they come before us. So I would second this motion.
All right, we have a first and a second. We take a roll call.
Mr. Pettit, you're muted.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make sure I understand the motion. It's a motion to require that the rear portion of the building be reduced by 1 story to better enhance the visibility of the church, and that a drop-off zone be developed on West 14th or Kenilworth as of the project.
That's
with
correct.
Consideration that the church and the house are important to the future plan of the site.
That is my motion.
Thank you.
Is there approval incorporated in that?
Yes, it was a motion to approve.
Okay.
With 2 stipulations.
Well, and I think it's understood that the parking variance has to be issued by the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Right.
As an additional condition.
Thank you for that clarification. I will call the roll. I'm sorry.
Before you do that, I want to understand Mr. Strickland's comment. The letter of intent is also part of this motion. Is that what was just mentioned by Mr. Strickland?
No, he was just addressing the fact that the project will have to be approved for variances by the Board of Zoning Appeals.
Okay, and also could you add in there that the changes to the height in the rear of the building go to staff for review?
Ms. Bailey, the motion is for those 2 items, I believe, to come back to the commission if they cannot be met. Is that correct, Mr. Strickland?
All right.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks for the clarification.
I will call the roll. We have a motion to approve with 2 conditions. Ms. Anderson.
Oh.
Ms. Bailey.
Yes.
Mr. Colicchia.
No.
Mr. Collier. Mr. Collier.
You're muted, sir.
I know, I wish I could stay muted. Okay, I'm gonna, this is a really tough call here. I just want to say that at the end of the day, these boards and commissions are, obligated and appointed to make decisions.
Right.
And I'm gonna go on record also saying that there will be people who don't agree. There will be people who agree. Again, just respect democracy, and just understand that whatever the conclusion is, this is a democratic process, and the outcome is the outcome. One other thing I want to say with respect to this approval with conditions from the developer, I need to be clear and understand that the reduction in height, looking at that reduction in height to respect the church, which could temper a somewhat of a redesign, that you are definitely going to be doing that analysis with the conditions that were outlined in this motion. And for me to submit a vote, I need to understand that there's a commitment to do that.
Agreed. Agreed, and we'll do it swiftly.
And one last thing with this motion that I want to be clear on as well. You indicated, Don, that if in fact they cannot meet that and they come back to the commission to articulate why they couldn't, what latitude or position do we have given there's an approval with conditions?
Excellent point.
Well, if I understand the motion, if they cannot meet the conditions, then they do not have an approval.
Okay.
And Mr. Strickland, I just need to be clear. Come back to the commission if they change to the height and provide the service access.
Don, I missed the first portion of your question. Can you restate it?
I want to understand, they need to come back to the commission, period? Or do they only need to come back if they cannot meet the two conditions?
I think that was Miss Bailey's inquiry.
Okay.
I would be comfortable with, we're so familiar with the design, I'm comfortable with staff review of redesign of the lowering of the height.
Well, I think they should come back to the commission. We need to see how these things are done, especially with the drive-through, the access structure.
You know what? I appreciate the clarification from Director Collier. And I think the motion is still not clear. I'm still thinking on what Mr. Harrison was saying. If they're not able to lower the rear due to the church, that we can still move forward with the design as presented. That's what I thought was, I misunderstood. So, motion is still not clear. Thank you, Director Collier, for clarifying that. I think the motion needs to be a little defined.
Well, the motion that was made refers to lowering the back of the building close to the church and to create a drive-through access structure to feed the building with services.
Well, if they cannot meet the stipulations, then they will come back to us. But for those parts, but they will at that point, it's my understanding of this motion, they will at that point have at least approval of the project, and they know that we're now refining it. I mean, this is a big project, so it might take that kind of one more round for those two issues, you know?
I agree.
But at least with this motion, they will know or not know whether they have approval.
Right. So I want to provide additional clarification. If they cannot meet those stipulations, they do not have approval of this project, period.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
All right, is everyone clear then?
Thank you all. We're in the middle of a vote. Mr. Collier, what is your vote?
I would say yes, barring those stipulations that were just articulated.
Mr. Dreyer,
No.
Mr. Harrison,
Yes.
Mr. Strickland,
Yes.
Mr. Tarasik,
Yes.
the motion passes 5-3.
All right. Next case is 20-029, the Luther House. Mr. President, do you have some comments regarding this project?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to point out that we had a site visit to the property on Tuesday. We will have, after the applicants present, we will have photographs from the site visit. Ms. Anderson was part of that walkthrough. And then after that, we will have a presentation from the Cleveland Restoration Society about the history of the house and the efforts to save it to date. Thank you.
Okay. My name is Steve Billington from the Cuyahoga Land Bank.
Land Bank.
Presentation that was submitted. A lot of feedback at the moment.
Adrian, could you mute? Okay.
I've already muted her.
Okay.
Okay, so I have a PowerPoint presentation just to go through. It really points to the condition of the property at this point. If you could go back to the front. Yeah. This front picture just shows the structure as it currently exists. As Mr. Pettit mentioned, he and a number of the commission members and city staff did a walkthrough of the property on Tuesday. Many people, including folks from the Cleveland Restoration Society, seem to have a lot of knowledge of this property over the last decade or so. You could slide to the next slide, please. This is an aerial view of the property. The first picture is as it relates to East 55th Street. And the second picture is a little bit of a closer look as it relates to the neighboring parcels in Lexington Avenue, 55th Street. There's one structure between our house and East 55th Street. A lot of demolition has taken place in recent years. If you could go to the next one, please. Next slide, please. Okay. This is a kind of closer look at some of the exterior conditions for those that haven't seen it recently. There's significant, it's a brick structure, but it's got significant disrepair. There's roofing issues. The driveways and all the hardscapes are damaged. And we've been maintaining the property for the last 3 years with mowing and removal of debris and trash and that nature. But the structure itself, this is the exterior condition as it stands today. If you go to the next one, please. This slide shows kind of the perspective of the house facing west towards East 55th. You don't see the house, the structure that's next to it, but facing southwest, facing south, there is a house across the street. facing east and southeast, there is mostly vacant parcels of land. If you could, some of the challenges you can tell from the exterior pictures are the roofing has issues. There's masonry, there's landscaping, the hardscaping, doors and windows are all boarded. If you could move to the next slide, please. This is take a look inside the structure. As I said, all the windows and doors are boarded and secured to prevent people from going into the dangerous structure. All the walls, many of the walls and beams and everything have either been removed or damaged in water over the years. The second set of pictures, the third three, are pictures in the basement, which is structurally compromised and significant water damage and animals throughout. There's a lot of little cutouts in the basement, little additions that have been added over the years. Each, over many years, each of which provides its own challenge. A lot of disrepair. I think you'll see a lot of that in some of the pictures that were taken by city staff as well. I think they focused on a number of those. You can go to the next one, please. This is the stairs approaching the second story, which are very unsafe. No one actually elected to go up these stairs. I've been up them. They're not, you really, one person at a time, if that, and they're really soft and dangerous. One of our biggest concerns is that someone would, it's a separate entrance unto its own, it's boarded. But if someone went up these stairs, these are certainly in a position where they may collapse. And even at the top of the stairs to get across into the main part of the floor is that fourth picture where there's significant holes. And that's really the floor plan throughout. There's really a small path you can walk through on the first floor that isn't soft, that doesn't have gaping holes in the floor, that isn't really it's still a concern, but it's somewhere where people feel comfortable walking, I've noticed. You can go to the next slide, please. So the Cuyahoga Land Bank, this property was condemned in 2014 by the city of Cleveland. There's a violation number there. We acquired the property in 2017. And in doing that, we do an assessment on the property to see what's the best use of it. In this instance, even in 2017, it was determined that it was very deteriorated in condition, and the rehab is not feasible at that point. There's a bullet point that average home sale prices in this census tract are rising, but remain quite low, 23,800 in 2017, and more recently it's ticked up, but not significantly. We sent part of our team in to do an assessment more recently, and it determined that it was essentially needed to be gutted down to the studs. I don't even think the studs would be able to remain. The stairways and floors would need to be removed and rebuilt. All the systems are out, stack plumbing, electrical, all repair. And at the very minimum, the estimate would cost $500,000 to restore the property. I heard another estimate at being $200 a square foot, which at this 3,839 square foot building, and that would be closer to $750,000 to rehab the property and to a historical standard. If you could move to the next slide, please. There has been inquiries about the property over the time that we've had control of it, including the people listed below. We've provided applications for acquisition. We've worked, allowed people to visit. There has been no things on the horizon that we are aware of. You move to the next slide, please. We've worked with the Cleveland Restoration Society to access property and given them an access agreement, long-term access agreement 3 times, starting in late 2018. It was at that point, initially, Cleveland Restoration Society donated a tarp for the roof to stop the leaking and try to quell the problem as best we can. There was a neighborhood task force that came through in July of 2019 and asked for access, and was granted. And then more recently, August 31st, expiring on February 29th, 2020, Cleveland Restoration Society asked for an extension. They haven't since asked for it. Any extensions on those to access or provide any more analysis onto whether or not the property can be renovated. We previously asked for a demolition permit, but we delayed it on respect to the community or the people involved. And at this point, we think that the only real solution is to tear down the property. It's dangerous and it's secured, but tentatively secured, and any people entering the property would be at risk of falling through the floor and perhaps any number of problems associated with that. We've owned the property for 2.5, coming on 3 years at this point, spent a significant amount of money, $4,000 plus, maintaining it, and countless visits to the property, but we really haven't had anything presented to us or anything seemingly on the horizon. So if you can go to the last slide, please. Our proposal is that we would demolish the building, we remove the parking surfaces, brick, cinder block, the retaining walls, the things that are just kind of left on the property, and maintain the mature, healthy trees the best we can, and put a finished grade, including topsoil, grass, seed, and straw. I'd like to point out that Gus Frangos, the president of the Land Bank, is also here, and he may have some comments to say as well.
I can't tell if can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, thank you, members of the commission. Appreciate the commission entertaining our request. I wanted to just provide some brief background of the Land Bank's work in this area. We are very to historic buildings and historic districts. We have worked on occasion with the Restoration Society, and we've had some successful projects. So we're not indifferent to some of the passionate comments that were made in the previous case. But we do operate in real time. We currently have to make sure properties are insured, boarded. We don't want neighbors complaining, as they do when people dump things onto the lot, etc. But quick background, since our inception in 2009, we have been taking in approximately a little over 100 properties per month up until January of this year. That's how much vacancy and abandonment and distressed properties have gone through the system. And so we probably can close to 11,000 properties in those years. Every single we do a thorough inspection on them, and we eventually try to decide. Our first inclination is to always try to see if a property has good bones on it, if it can be restored, and if the market will support it, even if it means taking a small loss. Nobody likes to lose money, but those are things that, as the Cuyahoga Land Bank and a nonprofit that we are, we entertain. So we're sensitive to it. But on the and that has resulted in about we have facilitated 2,000 home renovations through that process. So although a lot of times people view the Land Bank as a demolition outfit, we are still the big gorilla when it comes to home renovations over the years. And in that process, we have come across, we've learned a lot. And there are bad homes, there are really, really bad homes, and then there are homes that are just bad and dangerous. I mean, it just goes beyond the luxury of, trying to evaluate something out of context. This is a dangerous home, and our biggest concern is that a child, or some kids would go in there and find and would find them dead. So we just don't want that. And the city, this property is, as Steve said, in 2014. So we were not alone in determining that this house is condemnable. But as I said, some of you have gone in there, and I would assume that you saw for yourselves just how bad this property is. Yes, we have spent some costs on this, but in the house like this, I can tell you that cost is not much of our concern. It's the safety of this. Over the years, 1 or 2 homes we've had like this, that prior to demolition, there have been tragedies. Dead bodies have been found in them. So it's not hyperbole. I'm not trying to overstate my case. You're all professional and you'd be able to see through that, I am sure. But this is a situation where this is just rife for something like that to happen. And if it does happen, it's not going to probably be kids from many of our neighborhoods. It's going to be from that community that has indigenous citizens there. So my position is that, you know, we do try to meet halfway. We did hold this property. We did take the property in originally because our intent was altruistic. It was condemned. It was sort of on an island, very bad. And that's what we're partly charged to do, is to eliminate blight. But then when it came to light that there was interest in this, yes, we did sign an access agreement. We held this property for some time to allow the Restoration Society to see what they could possibly do to make this property somehow marketable. And, you know, we're 2 years into it right now. There's been, you know, I'm very familiar with the explanations that are typically given. You know, we're working on a plan. We've talked to so-and-so, we've done this, we've done that. The house is wonderful. It has a lot of history, and I want to be sensitive to that, and we are. This is not that house, in my opinion. And hopefully you've seen it through the pictures for those that walk through there. Hopefully you will have we have to take this property down. To not do that, in my opinion, and respectfully, would be irresponsible on all of our parts. But we're unfortunately the ones that are holding the property, and are going to be looked at as the ones that didn't do anything, and we just have to at this point. So thank you for allowing us to present, and I'll reserve some time after other presentations, and of course I'll take questions. Should I put my hand down now and mute?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm learning.
Mr. Chairman, we have Mr. Pettit with his hand raised, and I also have a message from Kathleen Crowther, who was with us earlier, and she had to leave the meeting, and she left a message that she wanted read. I can read it now or whenever you choose.
Why don't you read it now, please?
Okay. We have been pursuing the rescue of the Luther Moses House for many reasons, one of which is to honor the late Judge Ray Pianka. Ray fervently believed in rescuing the oldest relics of Cleveland history, including this house. Ray was the quiet funder of many supposed lost cause projects. Through his widow, Karen Pianka, we have funding, albeit limited, to stabilize this fragile historic property. With patience and partnership, we will continue to pursue the project as we know Ray Pianka would want us to do. Thank you for your sensitivity.
Thank you.
We have Mr. Pettit and Ms. Anderson and Ms. Councilman Brancatelli, it looks like, with their hands raised.
Mr. My comment invoking Ray Pianka's name, everything that Ms. Crowther said about him is certainly accurate. I served with Ray Pianka. I came into Cleveland City Council with Councilman Ray Pianka. Ray Pianka of history, but he's also a practical person. I served with him in situations like this where demolition was the only alternative for the safety of the public. So I appreciate invoking his name, but Councilman and Judge and the deceased Ray Pianka is also a very sensible man as well.
Thank you. Mr. Pettit, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's time for Carl Brunges of our staff took photographs of the walkthrough on Tuesday. I think, Maurice, if you could click through those, and if Michelle, you could just add your commentary as needed, that would be great. And then we'll hear from Tony Heedy at the Cleveland Restoration Society.
I did attend the site visit. The house is in very sad condition. There's a great deal of water damage on the interior, in addition to many structural issues. It's not that the house could not be brought back. It would be an extremely expensive endeavor. Unfortunately, that area does not support the kind of investment that the house needs. If you note in the photos, there are a number of architectural details, interesting architectural details that remain in the house. If we were to give it more time, I would put a strict time limit on this and for demolition, because this house probably should have been addressed 10, 15 years ago. It's almost to the point where, you know, unless it was in a neighborhood like a Tremont or Ohio City, we'd have to find like a nonprofit institutional probably purchaser who, you know, maybe could assemble some of the land around there and make it into a larger project. But it's pretty almost beyond hope at this point. Thank you.
We had Councilman Brancatelli and Mr. Harrison also with their hands raised.
Councilman Brancatelli, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you, Board. I am the chairman of the County Land Bank, and would also like to reiterate some of the what our director, Gus Frangos, had said. We've been more than engaging with a lot of preservation folks, as well as our local organizations and CDCs that have done a great job of bringing many properties back to life. Unfortunately, this is a property that we've had for 3 years now, and nobody has stepped forward. And I'll be very direct. Time is up. You know, we have been, the County Land Bank spends millions of dollars every year for property preservation and holding properties, cutting grass, taking off debris off sites, maintaining, et cetera. And so we give a lot of deference to folks who want to come forward and try and save a property, but this one's now 3 years past its time. And the liabilities that Gus mentioned are real. And so just kicking the can down the road is not a good option when everybody's had an opportunity to go through this property. The County Land Bank's website is very robust. It's one of the most recognized websites across the United States for a land holding company that has been given a lot of awards. And so it's a national website people have access to. This property's been on that website for quite a long time. So as Steve mentioned, people have been through the property. So I am urging the board not to kick the can down the road anymore. Everyone's had a chance to step forward on this property and raise their hand. And sadly, as Michelle stated, this property is beyond repair in terms of the market conditions. And when you look around all the blight that had been torn down around this property, it is its own island right now, quite frankly. So eliminating this condition and eliminating the eyesore, I would certainly urge the board to move forward with approving this this demolition to move forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Councilman.
Mr. Chairman, we had Mr. Brunges had suggested that Tony Heedy speak.
Okay.
Is he here?
Yeah, good afternoon, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members of the commission. I am the chair of Cleveland Restoration Society's task force that has, over the course of the last year or so, been focusing our attention on the Luther Moses house. We recognize that it is a very, very difficult challenge. It is a challenging property, not only because of its existing condition, which is in, as you've seen in the photos and the descriptions, in significantly deteriorated state, but it is also in a very disinvested area with a lot of vacant land. But all that understood, we feel because of its historic significance as one of the oldest surviving buildings on the east side from the 1850s and perhaps earlier, that it at least be given another fighting chance in over the course of the last year, we've made significant progress, and unfortunately, due to the pandemic, our efforts were somewhat impeded here in recent months. So we do have a PowerPoint, and I think we can go through it quite quickly, and I'll highlight a few points because I know this has been a long meeting. There you can see the location of the house. One of the things that we recognize are the great efforts by the city and other neighborhood stakeholders to redevelop the East 66th Street corridor. The yellow rectangle there on Lexington is the League Park development. So this is very, very close to that, and we're hoping that if we could have more time, that the energy from those redevelopment efforts could perhaps extend west. And we've been talking with stakeholders at Midtown, Cleveland Public Library, developing the New Hub Library, and seeing how those development efforts could incorporate or perhaps spin off to the Luther Moses House. Next slide. There is some of the context. Two of the largest property owners adjacent to the Luther Moses House are the two adjacent churches. We have reached out to them. Members of one of the congregations are on our task force, so we have broadly engaged the community with the hope that, recognizing that the Luther Moses House parcel is very small, that with the acquisition of adjacent parcels, some redevelopment would be more likely and perhaps possible. Next slide. As you know, there's been a lot of research on the history, so I won't dwell too long on the historic aspects of the house, but I know the commission members have been given some of that information in their packages, and I'll highlight some of the work that's been done by the people that are listed on that slide. Next. The history of the house goes all the way back to the earliest days of Cleveland and people moving here to the Northwest Territory. Elihu Moses was a captain in the Ohio militia during the War of 1812. He brought his family, which was one of the initial settlers in Ohio, from East Farmington and Trumbull here to Cleveland. He fought in the Battle of Lake Erie in the War of 1812 with Commander Perry and is buried in nearby East Cleveland Township Cemetery. His son, Moses Cleveland, was the owner of the home for that earliest period. Next slide. The family came here when Cleveland was just starting to grow back at that time after the War of 1812, when there was only approximately 600 inhabitants. Cleveland grew in prominence because of its large stands of white oaks as a primary shipbuilding city on the Great Lakes. Next slide. Next slide, please. And Luther Moses, you can see pictured there, is clearly one of the leading, most prominent shipbuilders of that area here in Cleveland. He had ships in every port in the Great Lakes, and an individual of some very recognized individual, not only in Cleveland, but throughout the Great Lakes region. He originally lived in Ohio City near his shipbuilding plant on the Cuyahoga River, and as a retirement acquired approximately 100 acres in what was then East Cleveland Township. Go to the next slide, please. And acquired 100 acres there, 34 acres of which was parcel that's now part of Lexington Avenue and East 55th Street. The house originally faced East 55th Street, Wilson Street, and all of the surrounding area was farms. Go to the next slide. This is not a drawing of that original property, but it gives an example of what the context, the historic context of the building would have been in the 1850s. It was a large farm homestead, sort of a retirement farm for Luther Moses and his wife. Next slide. The architecture of the house is in a Greek revival with some Gothic revival influences, and it's inspired by this ornamental farmhouse from the Andrew Jackson Downing pattern book of the 1840s. Next. In the 1860s, as Cleveland was growing, and that portion of the East Cleveland Village became incorporated into the city of Cleveland, Moses Cleveland began to consider subdividing, and in fact did subdivide that remaining 34-acre lot, and the street that is now called Lexington was renamed Moses Street. Next. Next slide, please. Next slide. Maurice, can you hear us?
Yes, I can. I've progressed 2 slides.
Okay. I'm not sure. On my screen, we're still frozen.
I think my computer is about to crash.
Okay. Well, without the slides in front of us, I can just sort of highlight the remaining portions of the history. After the lots were subdivided, the house was owned by Theodore Scoden and his wife. He was one of Cleveland's most prominent early engineers and developed the entire early water treatment plants in the city and the fresh water pumping from Lake Erie to Cleveland as it was developing rapidly. His family retained ownership of the property until 1911 when they sold it. It was in the years immediately after that that it was converted into a multi-family property, and the front entrance was relocated from Wilson Avenue to from Wilson East 55th to Lexington Avenue. The property remained a multi-family house all the way up until I think 2012 or so. In 1986, it was nominated, and in 1987 became designated a City of Cleveland landmark. Cleveland Restoration Society became initially involved in the property around 2012 when the then owner was facing challenges with maintenance and upkeep. We provided that individual with assistance, but unfortunately, as we've learned from the land bank, he was unable to properly maintain it, and the property rapidly declined into significant disrepair.